In 2023, Earth was standing on the edge of extinction. What started in 2010 as a competition between nations had transformed into something far more terrifying. The game called BattleNet was no longer entertainment. After the Space League opened in 2022, the entire planet was dragged into the competition, and only 10 nations were still standing. Their latest mission was simple on paper: defend humanity from the monster of the end, Behemoth. In reality, it was basically a boss fight against the apocalypse. The battle took place in the ruins of Manhattan. Behemoth emerged from the destroyed city, towering over the players like the final boss nobody had prepared for. The system gave humanity one objective: defeat the monster before it ended the world. The players formed a defensive line and attacked together, but Behemoth tore through them with overwhelming power. Their formation collapsed almost immediately, and the monster continued advancing as if the strongest players on Earth were nothing more than background enemies. Then one man stepped forward alone. Shang Jihan charged straight at Behemoth and defeated it by himself. When the battle ended, Jihan stood on top of the monster's corpse, while the surviving players stared at him in complete disbelief. Even the energy leaking from Behemoth's dead body was so powerful that most players could barely remain conscious near it. Jihan, however, had endured the energy from point-blank range. Unfortunately, surviving the battle did not mean he escaped unharmed. Behemoth's evil energy had severely damaged his left arm, leaving it in terrible condition. Sophia immediately began treating him with regeneration magic, but she warned him that the process would be extremely painful. And she was not exaggerating. The magic rebuilt his arm while Jihan endured the pain without making a sound. After the treatment was complete, a reward chest appeared. Since Baron Williams was the #1 player in the world and the Guildmaster of American First, he took charge of distributing the rewards. You would think the man who killed Behemoth would receive first choice. You would think wrong. Baron selected members of his guild before Jihan and completely ignored him. When Sophia protested, Baron finally explained his reasoning. Even though Jihan had been naturalized, Baron did not consider him a true American. To Baron, Jihan was nothing more than a useful dog. That insult hit especially hard because Jihan had already climbed to 7th place in the world rankings. He had just defeated the monster of the end by himself, yet American First still treated him like an outsider who should be grateful for whatever scraps they tossed his way. And honestly, Jihan had spent so long thinking of himself as a refugee that part of him had almost accepted it. He had survived after losing his homeland. Worse, he carried the guilt of being the only one left alive. No matter how powerful he became, that feeling never truly disappeared. Then the system announced the results of the Bronze League demotion prevention mission. The United States had succeeded. China had succeeded. The other 8 nations had failed. Out of 10 remaining countries, only 2 had survived the mission. Humanity had lost. But the real problem was that there was no lower league to fall into. Humanity had been judged worthless by the Space League, and the system prepared to expel the entire planet. Before deletion began, humanity was given one final opportunity: a demotion decision battle against a representative of the orcs. The players were horrified the moment they heard their opponent was an orc. They immediately demanded that Jihan be sent into battle. After all, humanity had defeated the orcs during the previous match because of him. But Baron refused. We will go without him. That decision was basically humanity choosing to fight the final boss while leaving its strongest weapon on the bench. The representative players from the other planets were summoned, and the battle began. Baron declared himself humanity's representative and attacked the orc first. It did not matter. The orc was overwhelmingly stronger. One human player after another was defeated, and the battle line disintegrated almost instantly. Even the priestess was knocked down, leaving her helpless in front of the monster. She begged the orc to leave her alone. The orc simply raised its axe and mocked humanity for being weak. Then the battle ended. Humanity had lost. The system announced that, no. 4,212 humanity had been demoted from the Bronze League. And then the deletion process began. Purple cracks spread across Earth's surface. Cities split apart, buildings were torn from the ground, and people vanished as the planet itself began breaking under the system's power. The surviving human players screamed for help, but no one came. One by one, they died. Then the system delivered the final announcement: humanity deletion complete. But immediately afterward, an error appeared. There are still humans remaining. Song Jihan was still alive. For a moment, he wondered if he had somehow become the only survivor again. But the system quickly identified the reason he had escaped deletion. His SSS rank skill, Nameless Divine Arts, was resisting the system's power. The skill had been passed down through fragments, but it had never fully awakened. To upgrade it, Jihan would have needed to remodel 3 divine secrets, or discover the true name of the Nameless. As he stood alone at the end of the world, Jihan could not stop thinking about that unfinished power. If he had awakened it sooner, would things have changed? Could he have protected the people he loved? Could he have saved humanity? The beings who governed the system judged Jihan to be weak, but they also recognized that he still possessed potential. His possibilities were too significant to simply erase. One of them asked a question: should we give him another chance? The votes were cast, and Song Jihan was sent back to the league's first entry era. When he opened his eyes, he was lying in a familiar room. There was no ruined Manhattan. No purple fractures tearing the earth apart. No corpses, no screams, and no system announcement declaring humanity's death. Confused, Jihan looked around before pulling open the curtains. Outside, the city was peaceful. The streets were untouched, the buildings were still standing, and the world had no idea what was waiting for it. Then a blue status window appeared in front of him. Name, Song Jihan. Level 2. Jihan stared at the information in disbelief. This was the beginning, the moment humanity had first entered the League. He had truly returned to the past, and this time, he possessed all the knowledge of the future. He knew about the battles, the monsters, the betrayals, and the fate waiting for Earth if nothing changed. Jihan turned toward a family photograph and slowly clenched his fist. No, I must change it. In his previous life, he had watched everyone disappear while standing powerless at the end of the world. But now, he had been given another chance. This time, he would protect everyone, because Song Jihan had already seen the end of the game. And now, he was back at the beginning. Before humanity ever faced the end of the world, Korea was one of the strongest nations in the BattleNet League. And its greatest weapon was Yoon Se-jin, the Sword King. He was ranked 3rd among the 11 strongest players on Earth. Basically, if BattleNet had a global leaderboard, this man was sitting near the top with enough power to make an entire country feel untouchable. Then Yoon Se-jin shocked everyone. He announced that he would change his name to Ito Ryuhei, become a Japanese citizen, and join Japan's new self-defense force. Just like that, Korea lost its strongest player. The country immediately plunged into chaos. No one could replace the Sword King, and Korea began suffering defeat after defeat. Its ranking dropped faster than a character getting speedran through a villain arc. By the time the Space League began, BattleNet was no longer just some competitive game. Nations that fell too far were invaded by monsters, and players who died inside the game also died in reality. Korea eventually collapsed. The survivors could only look back and say that maybe the country would have met a different fate if the Sword King had stayed. And now, Song Jihan had returned to that exact moment. Yoon Se-jin was not some random famous player to him. He had been Jihan's brother-in-law. But after watching Korea fall apart, Jihan blamed him for abandoning the country. He could not understand why his sister had ever loved someone like that. As he stared at the damaged family portrait, another thought surfaced. If his sister were still alive, would everything have turned out differently? Unfortunately, having the chance to change history did not mean Jihan had returned with all his old power. His status window revealed the brutal truth. He was only level 2. His basic stats were painfully low. He had no class, and the only gift he possessed was an F-rank ability called Wanderer's Eyes. It allowed him to view other players' information, which sounded useful until you realized it did absolutely nothing to help him survive a fight. In his previous life, Jihan had completely wasted the ability. Instead of understanding its value, he used it to gamble. He also failed to realize how important the awakening process would become later. That entire period of his life was basically alcohol, gambling, and terrible decisions. At one point, he even consumed an experience potion while drunk and accidentally reached level 2. Our boy really came back in time to save humanity, only to discover that his past self had been grinding intoxication instead of combat. But this regression had brought something new with it. Jihan discovered that he possessed 100,000 achievement points, along with a strange exchange coupon. It had been awarded to the last survivor who chose to challenge the game again. He used the coupon to unlock the achievement store. Then he upgraded it, and upgraded it again. After several improvements, the store unlocked inventory expansion, nickname functions, and finally an ability called Urgent Restoration. The name sounded simple, but the ability was ridiculous. Urgent Restoration could repair a defective item and return it to perfect condition. Jihan immediately realized that this was exactly the kind of power he needed. He entered Yoon Se-jin's playing room. Since Jihan was recognized as a family member, the system allowed him inside, even though the room's owner was absent. There, he accessed the inventory of the BattleNet connector and found the first item he wanted. It was called Dongfeng Shuo's Spoilt Brush. The brush was ranked A, but the system described it as useless. Normally, that would be the end of the story. An expensive-looking item with terrible potential, sitting in someone's inventory forever. But Jihan had just unlocked a way to fix defective items. He used Urgent Restoration on the brush. The damaged item immediately transformed. Dongfeng Shuo's Spoilt Brush became Dongfeng Shuo's Brush, an SS rank artifact connected to the martial god. Jihan understood what this meant. This brush was not just a powerful item. It was the first step toward obtaining the nameless divine art, the ability that had allowed him to survive the deletion of humanity in his previous life. The tutorial for the Gangnam Bronze League was about to begin, so Jihan had almost no time to waste. He took the restored brush and used it on his status window. Then he combined his strength, agility, and HP into a single unique stat, martial power. This was the stat that had once allowed him to rise to 7th place in the world rankings and earn the title of Martial Saint. In his previous life, it had taken him years to reach that point. Now, he had obtained it before even entering the league. The system announced that Jihan had gained a unique stat and rewarded him with another 10,000 achievement points. Jihan looked at his new power and felt confident. With martial power alone, he believed he could push through the entire Bronze League. Still, he understood that this was only the beginning. If he wanted to awaken the nameless divine art, he would need far more than one restored artifact and a powerful stat. But at least this time, he was starting with an advantage. Jihan logged into Battle.net without using the connector. The system immediately warned him that without the connector, he would experience all the pain of the game directly. Normally, Yoon Sejin's connector could reduce that pain by up to 99%. That was an extremely useful feature. Jihan decided he would use it later. For now, he wanted to feel the game exactly as it was. He appeared inside a massive coliseum packed with players. The mission was straightforward. 100 players would enter the arena, fight the monsters inside, and continue until only half of them remained. Survive the battle, and you passed. Fail, and you died. Before the fight began, Jihan's achievement window opened. A limited quest had appeared. Achieve first place in the tutorial and receive 1,000 achievement points. Jihan had never encountered this quest in his previous life. That alone proved something important. His return had already changed the timeline. And with martial power now in his possession, he had no doubt that first place would be easy. The game began. Before Jihan could even get comfortable, another player charged straight at him. "Newbie, I gotcha!" The player swung at him, clearly expecting an easy first kill. Jihan calmly countered the attack. The fight ended instantly. The player was dead, and Jihan's first kill had been recorded. Jihan looked at the result and smiled. Thanks for the first kill. After Jihan's first kill, the tutorial continued inside the Gangnam Area 1 League. To understand why this arena mattered, you need to know about guilds. These were organizations that trained and managed players, and as Battle.net became more popular, companies and nations began investing heavily in them. South Korea had built several powerful guilds, and Gangnam Area 1 was one of the strongest Bronze League arenas in the country. Among the players entering the match was Do Hyakyu from the Divergent Guild. Hyakyu possessed an A-rank agility gift, a rare ability that boosted his speed while ignoring the restrictions normally placed on players in the Bronze League. Because of this gift, many people believed he had the potential to break into the world's top 50. He was nervous, but he kept telling himself that he was luckier than everyone else. Unfortunately, confidence and common sense do not always spawn together. As Hyakyu looked around the arena, he saw players wearing impressive equipment from major guilds. Then he noticed one man dressed in nothing but a sleeveless shirt and sweatpants. No armor, no visible weapon, no proper gear at all. The guy looked less like a powerful player and more like someone who had been summoned into the game by administrative error. Hyakyu immediately decided that this apparent newbie would be his first kill. The moment the match began, he rushed forward and swung his sword at Jihan. Jihan stopped the blade with 2 fingers. Hyakyu froze. He could not understand what had just happened. His A-rank agility gift was supposed to make him faster than almost anyone in the Bronze League, yet this strangely dressed player had reacted without even looking surprised. Jihan, meanwhile, calmly studied him. His body had returned to level 2, and adjusting to that weakened body was proving more difficult than expected. Everything felt wrong. His movements were slower, his strength was lower, and the sensations he had once taken for granted had completely changed. But Jihan had survived countless battles. He could read an opponent's posture, predict their next movement, and recognize the direction of an attack before it was even launched. So while Hyakyu believed he was moving at incredible speed, Jihan could see the entire attack coming. To Jihan, Hyakyu was not especially fast. Jihan was simply much slower than he used to be. That realization alone showed how ridiculous his previous level had been. Jihan looked at Hyakyu and questioned whether someone with an A-rank agility gift had really entered the Gangnam Bronze League. Hyakyu took that personally. He insisted that A-rank agility was not something Jihan could dismiss, then charged again at full speed. This time, he put everything into the attack. Jihan met him head-on. He moved faster than Hyakyu could even follow, knocked the sword out of his hand, and drove his attack straight through Hyakyu's chest. The man stared down at the wound in disbelief. Impossible. His body began dissolving into blue particles. But even while dying, Hyakyu refused to accept the result. He shouted that he would defeat Jihan the next time they met. Jihan simply looked down at him. To think he's talking about a next battle when he's already dead. That is an impressive level of confidence. Completely misplaced, but impressive. The system announced that Jihan had taken the tutorial's first kill and rewarded him with 100 achievement points. Hyakyu's weapon disappeared along with his body, which disappointed Jihan. He had hoped to take it after the fight, but apparently the system was not handing out free loot today. Now that he had warmed up, Jihan decided to secure his position by defeating more players. But as he looked around the Coliseum, he noticed something strange. Almost everyone was avoiding the monsters. That was because Battle.net rewarded player kills far more generously than monster kills. Killing a monster counted as only 1/10 of a player kill, meaning players had to defeat 10 monsters to equal the value of a single opponent. Naturally, most participants preferred hunting other players. The orcs were especially unpopular. They appeared in large mobs, carried dangerous weapons, and were strong enough to overwhelm anyone who underestimated them. Then a new quest appeared in Jihan's achievement window: Annihilate the Orc Mob. The quest identified a group of 30 orcs as the strongest monster group inside the Colosseum. If Jihan defeated all of them, he would receive 500 achievement points. That was 5 times the reward he had earned for his first kill. Hunting monsters might normally be inefficient, but the reward made this opportunity too good to ignore. Jihan looked toward the orc mob. "A monster's just a monster," he said. "They're nothing compared to a real orc." Then he approached them alone. The orcs were stunned when they saw a human with no equipment charging directly toward their group. They shouted that he had to be insane and threatened to kill him. One of the orcs swung a massive axe at Jihan. He dodged the blow, caught the weapon, and immediately threw it back. The axe struck through the surrounding monsters with overwhelming force. The rest of the mob charged together, hoping their numbers would bury him. But Jihan moved between them with perfect timing, turning their weapons and momentum against one another. He seized their attacks, redirected their strikes, and smashed several orcs apart before they could even understand what was happening. The system updated the quest. Number killed, 5 out of 30. 25 orcs were still standing, and Jihan continued forward. 25 orcs were still standing, and every single one of them had now surrounded Song Jihan. They shouted for his death before attacking together, confident that sheer numbers would finally overwhelm him. Jihan remained completely calm. He moved through the mob with overwhelming speed and strength, turning the orcs' own weapons against them. Every time one of them swung, he dodged, redirected the attack, and punished the opening before the monster even realized it had made a mistake. Then Jihan's wooden weapon broke. The orcs immediately began mocking him. They ordered one another to charge and finish him off, clearly believing that their human opponent had finally lost his only weapon. Jihan looked at the broken stick in his hand, then at the orcs surrounding him. "You should carry better weapons. Despite your size, all of your weapons are weak." Bro really decided to review their equipment in the middle of a deathmatch. The orcs charged anyway. Jihan met them with his bare hands. He smashed through the first monster, seized another orc's weapon, and sent several enemies flying with a single strike. Even the larger creatures could not withstand him. Their size, numbers, and weapons meant nothing against someone who had already survived countless real battles. One of the orcs finally understood what was happening. "He's a monster!" That realization came a little late, considering their entire group had been getting dismantled in front of him. Jihan completed the Annihilate, the orc mob quest, and received 500 achievement points. He also leveled up during the match. That was unusual. Players normally did not level up until the game ended, but Jihan's performance had already broken the usual pattern. He opened his status window and looked at the stat point he had remaining. His martial power combined strength, agility, and stamina into one unique stat. When those 3 basic stats held the same value, martial power could at least double his abilities. The stat was also connected to the nameless divine arts. If Jihan raised martial power to 30, he would have a chance to obtain the SSS rank skill. That was the real reason he cared about it. Martial power was not just making him stronger in the present. It was also part of the path toward the power he had failed to awaken in his previous life. Normally, martial power was extremely difficult to increase. Players needed years of combat experience and training before they could improve its growth potential. But Jihan's martial power had already increased, so he used his remaining stat point on it. Martial power rose to 6. This is great, and naturally, Jihan immediately wanted to test his new strength. Unfortunately, the other players had begun targeting him. The survival map was designed for player versus player combat, and the system did not prevent players from forming teams. That meant 2 players could combine their abilities and hunt down anyone they considered dangerous. A warrior and an archer from the Turtle Guild had teamed up. One specialized in close-range combat while the other attacked from a distance. The Turtle Guild was one of South Korea's top 10 guilds, so these 2 were not random beginners looking for trouble. They had decent equipment, solid teamwork, and enough confidence to believe they could eliminate Jihan quickly. Jihan soon realized they had specifically chosen him as their target. He could have avoided the fight and survived without much trouble, but he understood why they had come after him. Wearing only a sleeveless shirt and sweatpants, with almost no proper equipment, he looked like the easiest player in the arena. They had mistaken a lack of equipment for a lack of danger. The archer fired first. Jihan dodged the arrow, and the warrior immediately followed with a close-range attack. The 2 players moved together, confident that their coordinated assault would overwhelm him. But Jihan attacked before they could complete their formation. His increased martial power made the difference instantly. He slipped through their attacks, closed the distance, and cut down the archer before she could fire another shot. The warrior stared at her body in shock. He demanded to know how Jihan had killed her so easily. Jihan did not bother answering. He attacked the warrior without hesitation. The knight relied on the Turtle Guild's exclusive B-rank armor and proudly claimed that its protection was too strong for Jihan's poor weapon to pierce. That confidence lasted about 3 seconds. Jihan struck the same weak point in the armor again and again. The first impact made the knight stagger. The next caused a crack. With every repeated blow, the armor's defense broke down a little further. The knight's expression changed. He had entered the fight believing his armor made him untouchable. Now, he was watching Jihan methodically destroy it with a weapon that was supposedly inferior. Jihan continued, striking the same spot until the armor finally gave way. Girls in B-rank armor. Are you here just to lounge around? The insult hit almost as hard as the attack. Jihan overwhelmed the knight and secured both kills. The scoreboard updated. Jihan was now in first place with 6 kills. Lim Gaeyoung held second place with 4, while the rest of the players were far behind. Jihan had only barely held the lead before, but after destroying the orc mob and eliminating the Turtle Guild pair, he finally had a chance to secure first place for good. Elsewhere in the arena, members of the Divergent Guild had been watching everything. Lee Haeon, the head of the guild's Human Resources 3rd Division, was especially surprised by Jihan's performance. This was not what she expected from a player who had entered the tutorial wearing almost no equipment and carrying nothing impressive. Standing beside her was her bodyguard, Lim Gaeyoung. Gaeyoung was worried that she might be forced to fight Jihan. After watching him tear through the orc mob and defeat the Turtle Guild players, she understood that he was not some defenseless newcomer. She suggested avoiding the battle, but Lee Haeon ordered her to fight. The Divergent Guild needed information about Jihan, and the only way to understand his abilities was to test them directly. Lim Gaeyoung accepted the order. I've seen him before. So, Shang Jihan had entered the tutorial wearing sweatpants and a sleeveless shirt. He had no guild backing him, no proper equipment, and barely any time to prepare. Yet somehow, he still walked away with 6 kills in first place. The results stunned every guild watching the match. Even the Turtle Guild scouts could not understand how a level 2 player with no affiliation had dominated the tutorial so completely. They had seen players with powerful gifts, expensive gear, and years of support fail to achieve what Jihan had done almost casually. But the biggest surprise was Lim Gaeyoung. The Divergent Guild had expected Gaeyoung to take first place. She possessed an S-rank gift, 4 kills, and the equipment necessary to become one of the guild's strongest prospects. Then Jihan showed up looking like he had just rolled out of bed and stole the entire match from her. When Jihan returned home, the system officially announced his victory. As a reward, his experience gain increased by 50%, and his level jumped from 3 to 6. Since he was still considered a rookie, the system treated his rapid growth as normal. Jihan used all of his remaining stat points on martial power, raising it from 6 to 9. Then the system gave him a nickname, Tutorial Conqueror. Within the Bronze League, that nickname granted 1 point to every attribute and increased his experience gain by another 20%. With the extra boost, Jihan's martial power reached 10. That gave him the equivalent of a free advantage over ordinary Bronze League players. And the funniest part was that he had not even started taking the game seriously yet. The silver promotion battle would not begin until he reached level 25, so Jihan decided to focus on developing himself first. There was no reason to rush into the next promotion when he could use this time to build a stronger foundation. At level 5, players could advance to a basic class. The available choices were Warrior, Archer, Mage, and Support. In his previous life, Jihan had chosen Warrior. It was the obvious decision for someone who specialized in close combat. But this time, Regression had given him access to the achievement store. By spending 10,000 points, he could unlock an additional class slot and obtain the Warrior class later whenever he wanted. For the first time, Jihan did not have to repeat the choices that had defined his old life. So he selected Support. The system immediately warned him that the class was incompatible with him. That was putting it mildly. Jihan had spent his previous life fighting at the front lines, earning the title of Martial Saint through overwhelming physical power. The Support class was not designed for someone like him. The system asked him to confirm his decision. Jihan accepted without hesitation. Class advancement was completed. His status now identified him as a support player, and a new divine stat appeared on the screen. Jihan already knew that this stat was difficult to raise. Unlike ordinary abilities, it could not simply be improved through normal training. Most players had to invest their limited stat points directly into it. But Jihan knew another method, a method almost nobody else understood, and he was about to test it in his next Bronze League match. The mission took place in the Gangnam area. This time, the objective was defense. The players had to protect a crystal while surviving against waves of zombies. The battle would continue until only 5 towers remained. Among Jihan's teammates was Lim Gaeyoung, the level-ranked warrior from the Divergent Guild. The rest of the group included a silver-haired archer from the LK group and a powerful mage whose guild affiliation was unknown. Jihan took one look at the battlefield and immediately understood what kind of fight this would become. A defense mission was not about winning quickly. It was a long battle of attrition. The players had to keep the enemies away from the crystal while surviving wave after wave. And in a mission like that, support players were extremely important. A well-timed assist could keep the entire team alive. A weak one could cause the defense to collapse before the players even realized they were losing. The zombies began surging toward the crystal, groaning as they clawed at the defenses below the towers. Jihan watched them approach with a serious expression. He already knew this map was going to be unpleasant. But before the zombies could even become the group's biggest problem, the other players discovered Jihan's chosen class. He's a support? Everyone turned toward him in disbelief. The player who had conquered the tutorial, the guy who had taken first place without equipment or guild support, had chosen support instead of warrior. Some of them could not understand the decision. Others immediately started mocking him. They looked at his sleeveless shirt and poor equipment, calling him a beggar and asking why anyone would waste expensive gear on someone so badly prepared. The mage became especially irritated. One player attempted to calm him down, but the mage continued complaining and threatened to withdraw from the battle. The team had barely entered the mission, and already the players were fighting among themselves. Meanwhile, the zombies were gathering below the towers. The situation was turning into a complete disaster. The crystal needed protection, the enemies were closing in, and the group's strongest members were wasting time arguing over Jihan's class choice. Jihan had very little patience for it. If you don't want to play, then don't. That only made the tension worse. Some players tried to restrain the angry mage, while others prepared to continue the mission without him. Their cooperation was already falling apart before the first real wave had even reached the defenses. Jihan remained calm in the middle of the chaos. He looked at the arguing players, then at the advancing zombies. You people manage it yourselves. The mission had only just begun, but the group was already struggling to survive its own teammates. Jihan, however, was not worried. He had chosen the support class for a reason. And now, with the zombies closing in, he was ready to show everyone exactly why. Kim Gyu-hyuk was begging for his life. In the Bronze League defense mission, every player had 3 lives. Kim had already been killed by Song Jihan once and resurrected, but Jihan had defeated him again. That left Kim with only 1 life remaining. If he died one more time, he would be placed last in the match. His level would drop, and any skills he could no longer meet the requirements for would be deleted. So Kim changed his attitude immediately. The system identified him as a level 15 fire mage, and that made him extremely valuable in this mission. Fire magic was highly effective against groups of zombies, which meant Kim could clear entire waves and help protect the towers. He had also once belonged to one of Korea's 10 great guilds, but after failing 4 silver promotion battles, his reputation had completely collapsed. He went from being a respected player to someone known as a loser. Now he was desperate to protect the skills he had bought with his own money. Kim demanded that Jihan apologize for killing him and promised to cooperate afterward. The nerve of this guy was almost impressive. He had already lost twice and was still acting like Jihan owed him customer service. But beneath the arrogance, his fear was genuine. Kim knew that another death would destroy his progress. The battle continued around the towers as waves of zombies attacked the crystal. Kim unleashed fire magic across the battlefield, burning through groups of undead and helping the players hold their positions. Jihan remembered that Kim had once been highly respected, but the man standing in front of him now was unreliable, hot-tempered, and willing to argue in the middle of a survival mission because his remaining life was on the line. Jihan was not interested in dealing with that kind of teammate. Before accepting Kim's cooperation, he imposed his own condition. The argument grew louder, and Kim eventually ended up defeated again. The system announced that the mage-class player, Kim Gyu-hyuk, had died. He had only 1 life left. With the situation becoming even more chaotic, Jihan received a limited quest. He needed to take first place in the 10 towers. The reward was 1,000 achievement points. Then a linked quest appeared. The zombie's origin required Jihan to kill 1,000 zombies by himself. If he succeeded, he would receive 3,000 achievement points. Jihan stared at the number. 1,000 zombies. The defense mission might end before he could even reach that total, and trying to kill so many enemies alone sounded almost impossible. But 3,000 achievement points was far too large a reward to ignore. So, naturally, Jihan decided to try anyway. Lim Ga-young had been watching him for a while, and she was becoming more confused with every passing minute. Jihan did whatever he wanted, chose the support class despite clearly being built for combat, and acted nothing like an inexperienced casual player. Lim could not understand why the Divergent Guild had ever considered scouting someone like him. The other players began preparing for another wave. Lim moved toward the front and told Jihan to stay behind while the others protected him. Since Jihan had chosen the support class, they assumed his role was to remain safe and assist from a distance. Jihan refused. "I'll take everything in the front." The group was still arguing when a different kind of zombie appeared. This creature had a liquid-like head, making it nearly impossible to defeat with ordinary physical attacks. The players struck it with their weapons, but none of their attacks produced a decisive result. The blood zombie continued advancing. It was the worst possible matchup for a team relying on physical damage. Then strange flames began appearing around Jihan. The system identified them as white sacred flames. The surrounding players quickly realized that the flames came from Jihan's divine power. Jihan stared at the fire in surprise. This was why he had chosen the support class. He knew that the class possessed abilities connected to divine power, but until now, he had not understood what that power could actually do. The blood zombie lunged toward him. Jihan stepped forward to meet it. He was not completely certain that his new power would be enough, but hesitation had never been his style. He raised his weapon and faced the monster head-on. Let's give it a go. The linked quest began recording his kills. Zombies killed, 6 out of 1,000. And just like that, Jihan's experiment had begun. Shang Jihan continued tearing through the zombie hordes. The ordinary zombies were easy enough, but the blood zombies were a completely different problem. Normal physical attacks could not damage them properly, which meant the player's weapons were basically useless. Jihan had already discovered the solution. Whenever a blood zombie appeared, he released a small amount of divine power and destroyed it instantly. No dramatic charge, no complicated spell. Just a little divine power, followed by another monster getting deleted from the battlefield. His kill count climbed rapidly. Eventually, it reached 210. The system announced that he had fulfilled the condition for the linked quest. Jihan had completely understood an otherworld's faith. His divine power increased from 6 to 7. That might not sound like a huge improvement, but Jihan immediately understood how valuable it was. He also knew another way to increase it, using divine items from other worlds. The problem was that most players had no idea how those items worked. Since Earth first entered the tutorial in 2010, otherworldly divine items had been traded for extremely high prices. Everyone believed they contained hidden secrets, but after 10 years without anyone making a major discovery, interest in them slowly disappeared. Their value dropped, and some players did not even realize the items still existed. There was one major exception. Sophia, the Saintess of American First, had increased her divine power by using an otherworldly divine item. She explained that a player could gain divine power by holding the item and praying. The exact method depended on the item, but the general principle was simple. Pray, and the object might grant you power. Jihan was surprised that such an easy method had remained hidden for so long. Sophia explained that the items were incredibly rare, and the method only worked during the tutorial. Because she had discovered it early, she had been able to monopolize a large number of them. But Jihan soon realized that Sophia was not the only person who knew this secret. There was someone else, his elder sister, Song Jia. Unfortunately, Jia had died long ago. But before her death, she had left behind several otherworldly divine items. Jihan went to the Sword Palace penthouse and searched through them. Eventually, he found a steel pole. The system identified it as an E-rank otherworldly divine item. According to its description, clergy from another world had used the pole to strengthen faith by striking cult members on the head, which is certainly one way to encourage religious devotion. The steel pole had already lost most of its divine power, and its grade fell even further as Jihan absorbed the remaining energy. Even so, the item was still sturdy enough to use as a weapon, so Jihan picked it up and started smashing zombie skulls with it. The other players were stunned. They had expected a support player to stay behind the front line, provide assistance, and avoid direct combat. Instead, Jihan was charging through the battlefield with an absurd physique and precise control over his energy. He fought with a level of skill that none of them expected from someone wearing almost no equipment. And this was not just raw strength. Jihan controlled every movement perfectly. He knew exactly when to attack, where to strike, and how much divine power to use. Then, in the middle of the battle, he encountered a swordswoman wielding the Plum Blossom sword. Something about her immediately felt familiar. Jihan remembered her future. She would eventually become famous as the interim Sword King, but her story would end badly. In the future, she would be killed by Yoon Sejin, the same man who would later take the name Ryuhei. Jihan had already watched too many people die because of events he failed to change. So when the opportunity appeared, he intervened and saved the swordswoman once again. Afterward, Lim Gaeong and another player approached him. They asked if they could join his side. Fighting together would give them a better chance of surviving and achieving a high ranking. Jihan checked the scoreboard. He was currently in 5th place with 398 kills. The linked quest showed 397 out of the required 1,000 zombie kills. But there was a problem. Less than 2 minutes remained. The players gathered near the crystal as the zombies climbed toward the tower. The battlefield was becoming crowded, and the remaining enemies were closing in from every direction. Jihan looked at the horde and immediately formed a plan. Instead of chasing the zombies around the map one by one, he would gather them all in a single location. Then he would destroy them at once. It was a ridiculous plan, especially with the clock running down and the crystal under attack. But Jihan had never been interested in doing things the ordinary way. He prepared to pull every remaining zombie toward him. I'm going to gather everything up and blow it all to smithereens. The defense battle finally came to an end with Song Jihan and his allies as the last players standing. Jihan had secured first place in the 10 towers and completed the limited quest, but his linked quest was still unfinished. He had only reached 560 out of the required 1,000 zombie kills. So after carrying the entire mission, he still did not get the full reward. The surviving players praised Jihan for saving the team, but he was already thinking about the next opportunity. Once he became stronger, he would try the quest again. The only problem was that he had no idea whether the linked quest would ever appear a second time. Lim Gaeong was still trying to process what he had witnessed. Jihan had entered the battle as a lower-level support player with almost no equipment and no guild affiliation. Yet somehow, he had ranked first while fighting at the front lines and destroying enemies that the other players could barely handle. Lim introduced himself as a member of the Divergent Guild and asked for Jihan's phone number. The guild wanted to recruit him. Jihan hesitated. He had used his American number for so long that he could no longer remember his Korean one. That is a hilariously awkward problem to have after dominating an entire tutorial. If we meet again, I'll let you know then. Jihan said goodbye and left. Lim stood there frozen, wondering if he had just been rejected. Meanwhile, Jihan started wondering whether he had accidentally attracted a guild's attention simply by standing out too much. He had no intention of joining a guild right away. He had just returned from the end of the world. Joining an organization was not exactly at the top of his priority list. After leaving the game, Jihan checked his updated status. His level had risen to 8, his divine power had reached 7, and he had earned 1,500 GP. His support class was still active, as was the nickname Tutorial Conqueror. The GP store displayed several otherworldly holy items, but each one cost 3,000 GP. Jihan could not afford any of them yet. That only made him more interested in the divine items his sister had left behind. At first, he had assumed they were ordinary objects with little value. But after learning how divine power worked, he realized that his sister's storage might contain items worth far more than he had imagined. Jihan decided to return home and search through everything again. When he arrived, he immediately noticed a pair of black loafers near the entrance. Someone was awake. He opened the door and saw Sia. For a moment, Jihan could not move. In his previous life, Sia had been one of his greatest regrets. Everyone has something they wish they could change, but for Jihan, failing to protect her was the regret that stayed with him the longest. He had already lost so many people. He had watched the world collapse, watched the people he loved disappear, and eventually stood alone at the end of humanity. Now, Sia was standing in front of him alive. She was surprised to see him awake so early, and even more surprised that he had gone outside. She asked about his hangover, but Jihan struggled to respond normally. There were too many things he wanted to say. If you had lost someone forever, then suddenly received one more chance to see them, how would you even begin that conversation? Jihan could not explain where he had been or what he had witnessed. He could not tell her that he had already seen the end of the world, so he simply stood there, trying to act like this was an ordinary morning. Sia gently reassured him that everything would be all right. Those words brought back memories of promises they had made long ago. She had promised to protect him, and Jihan had promised to protect her. In his previous life, he had failed. This time, he would not. Jihan looked at her, holding back everything he wanted to say. Yoon Sia was 18 years old and Shang Jihan's niece. She was the daughter of Yoon Sejin and Jihan's older sister. Because Jihan's sister had spent most of her time working to support the family, Jihan had helped raise Sia from a young age. After losing his own family, Sia had become the most important person left in his life. Now, the two of them were living together. But Sia's father had recently contacted her with devastating news. Yoon Sejin had fallen in love with another woman, and that woman had made one condition clear. If Sejin wanted to be with her, he had to abandon his daughter and leave Korea behind. Sejin accepted. He chose the woman and walked away from his own child. Sia was completely crushed. What am I supposed to do from now on? Are you going to throw me away and leave like this? Yoon Sejin answered yes. That was all it took to ignite Jihan's anger. To him, Sejin was not just a man abandoning his daughter. He was an irresponsible traitor who had also abandoned Korea for the sake of one woman. Jihan's rage became so intense that he broke the family photograph. Sia immediately noticed. Uncle, you broke this family photo, didn't you? Jihan apologized and explained that he had lost control because he was angry. But Sia told him not to worry and insisted that she was fine. That was how she had always been. Even when she was the one being hurt, Sia would force a smile and worry about Jihan instead. She carried her pain quietly so that he would not have to carry it with her. And Jihan remembered what happened in his previous life. He had failed to protect her. This time, he would not allow her to face everything alone. Jihan gently placed his hand on her head. Sia, you're all grown up now. The sudden tenderness caught her off guard, but Jihan continued before she could say anything. From now on, I'll protect you. He had already watched the world destroy everyone he loved once. There was no way he would let the same thing happen again. Meanwhile, over at the Divergent Guild, Lim Gaeong was being mocked for failing to obtain Jihan's phone number. Lee Haein and the other guild members found it hilarious that someone as capable as Lim had been rejected so quickly. They were also discussing Jihan's recruitment. After seeing his performance in the tutorial, Lee Haein believed the guild could not afford to ignore him. Jihan, however, was busy checking his own status. He had reached level 8, earned 1,500 GP, and raised his divine power to 7. His support class and Tutorial Conqueror nickname were still active. The GP store offered several otherworldly holy items, but every one of them cost 3,000 GP. Jihan could not afford any of them yet, so he decided to search through the storage his sister had left behind and look for more divine items. After what he had already discovered, he was beginning to realize that those objects might be far more valuable than he had originally believed. Later, Jihan received a notification that his live broadcast had begun. Sia helped him confirm that the stream was working on her phone. Jihan then introduced himself to the audience as the brother-in-law of the Sword King. That introduction instantly caused chaos. Some viewers were curious about his connection to Yoon Sejin. Others accused the Sword King of betraying Korea and mocked Jihan for using his name. The broadcast took place near the famous twin sword statue, a landmark connected to Yoon Sejin. Jihan looked at the statue. For years, that monument had represented the Sword King's strength and reputation. But to Jihan, it also represented betrayal. Everything Sejin had abandoned, including his daughter and his country. So Jihan stepped forward and struck it. The stone structure cracked under the force of his attack. A moment later, the entire statue collapsed. The viewers exploded with shock. The chat filled with confusion, insults, and arguments about the Sword King. Nobody understood why Jihan had destroyed such a famous landmark. But the audience continued growing as more people joined the broadcast to see what he would do next. Then the system recorded an achievement. Jihan felt an unexpected sense of relief. He had wanted to destroy the symbol connected to Yoon Sejin's betrayal for a long time. Now, standing in front of the ruined statue, he finally felt as if he had taken the first step toward cutting away the past. Jihan turned toward the fallen monument. Now then, I'll start speaking about Sword King Yoon Sejin's naturalization. BattleTube was BattleNet's global streaming platform, watched by more people than any other service in the world. Streamers earned rewards based on their viewers, likes, and even dislikes. So when Song Jihan destroyed the twin sword statue, the broadcast immediately exploded. The system awarded him achievements for attracting viewers and collecting more than 100,000 dislikes. Jihan did not care about the outrage. In fact, that was exactly what he wanted. To think there'd be a time when Yoon Sejin would be useful. The Sword King's supporters flooded the chat, furious that Jihan had destroyed the statue honoring their hero. Some accused him of being a Japanese spy, while others warned him to watch what he said. Jihan had deliberately placed himself in the center of their anger. In his previous life, Yoon Sia had been blamed for everything her father did. She was the Sword King's only blood relative, and after Yoon Sejin abandoned Korea to join Japan, she was left with nowhere to go. His supporters turned against her. They harassed her, threatened her, and made her pay for a betrayal she had never committed. Eventually, Sia took her own life. Jihan had returned to the past with one goal: prevent that tragedy. And the easiest way to protect Sia was to make himself the target instead. "I hope all of you listen carefully," Jihan said. "I'll gladly become that target." He then announced that Ito Ryuhei would not be returning to Korea. To prove what had happened, Jihan played the original recording of the phone call between Yoon Sejin and his daughter. Sia had asked her father why he was leaving so suddenly. She wanted to know whether he truly intended to abandon her. Yoon Sejin explained that he had fallen in love with another woman, and that leaving his daughter and Korea was the condition she had given him. Sia could hardly believe what she was hearing. "You're really going to abandon me here like this?" His answer had been yes. The recording stunned everyone watching. Some viewers immediately called it fake news. Others began arguing in the chat. But as the conversation continued, the truth became impossible to ignore. Yoon Sejin had really chosen to leave. Then Sia appeared on the broadcast herself. "Hello, I'm Yoon Sia, the Sword King's daughter." She explained that her father intended to pass the Sword Palace on to her. But Sia refused to accept an inheritance from a man who had abandoned both his country and his family. Instead, she had decided to donate the building to Korea. The Sword Palace was not just an expensive property. It could become a place where Korean players trained, developed their abilities, and prepared for the battles ahead. The announcement shocked the audience. People could not believe Sia was willing to give away something so valuable. But Jihan had already spent the previous 30 minutes convincing her. "You want us to donate the house?" Sia had questioned whether he was serious. Jihan assured her that he was no longer drunk and asked her to trust him. The Sword Palace was too valuable to sell casually. If Sia simply kept it or sold it for money, the Sword King's supporters could still treat her as part of her father's betrayal. But if she donated it to Korea, the public would see her differently. She would not be the daughter defending Yoon Sejin. She would be the one rejecting his decision and giving something back to the country he abandoned. That support could protect her from the people who would otherwise turn their hatred against her. Jihan was not trying to create a dramatic headline. He was trying to make sure Sia survived this time. After the announcement, Korea and Japan erupted in controversy. Yoon Sejin's decision to represent Japan had already destroyed Korea's strongest player base. Now, his name, his assets, and his daughter had all become part of a massive political and public scandal. The BattleTube audience continued growing as viewers debated Jihan's statements. Some mocked him for attacking the Sword King. Others were already looking forward to a future confrontation between Korea and Japan. Jihan ignored all of it. The insults, the accusations, and the hatred were useful. As long as the anger stayed focused on him, Sia would be safer. Meanwhile, in Japan, Yoon Sejin watched the reaction beside Shizuru. He was now known as Ito Ryuhei, but Shizuru still called him Sejin. "I've taken your name," he told her. "I'm Ito Ryuhei now." Shizuru rejected that immediately. "No, you're wrong." To her, he was still Yoon Sejin. Changing his name and nationality had not changed who he was. But while the two remained together in Japan, Korea's former Sword King was finally beginning to face the consequences of his decision. Back in Korea, Jihan continued the broadcast. Now then, I'll start speaking about Sword King Yoon Se-jin's naturalization. Manager Park Yoon-sik from the South Korean government's BattleNet department soon visited Song Ji-han and Sia. The department had stopped coming around after Yoon Se-jin left Korea. But once the Sword Palace was donated, the situation became a national issue. Park explained that the government had not completely given up hope of Yoon Se-jin returning, especially with the upcoming Korea-Japan match approaching. So instead of accepting the Sword Palace as a permanent donation, the government proposed consigned management. The ownership would remain available to Yoon Se-jin if he ever came back, while the government would manage the building in the meantime. Ji-han immediately understood the advantage. He had already intended to hand over the entire property. But with this arrangement, he and Sia could continue living there instead of being forced out. The government agreed to favorable conditions, including their continued residence in the Sword Palace. After discussing the details, Ji-han accepted the proposal. But before finalizing everything, he asked what favor the government wanted in return. Meanwhile, BattleNet's next game was beginning. The match took place in the Bloody Dusty Coliseum, where a popular BattleTube streamer called Golden Light had already started broadcasting. Golden Light was famous for his flashy appearance, loud personality, and endless energy. He was also infamous for being a troll. Winning was not his main priority. He preferred harassing weaker Bronze League players and turning their misery into content. And he could get away with it because his equipment and stats were still at the gold rank. Against bronze players, he was basically bringing a tank to a pillow fight. Let's see who the first victim will be. The chat filled with excitement as Golden Light searched the arena. Then he noticed Song Ji-han. Ji-han was standing nearby with a wooden club in his hands, looking at Golden Light with complete confusion. Content? Golden Light immediately realized that Ji-han was perfect for the stream. He called him the Sword King's brother-in-law, Bronze's strongest player, and the man who had destroyed the twin sword statue. Ji-han had attracted so much attention recently that even Golden Light's viewers recognized him. Ji-han quickly understood that Golden Light was a BattleTube streamer, and that reminded him of the BattleTube achievements he could still obtain. I'll raise the views a bit. The moment he made that decision, a reward mission appeared. Kill Song Ji-han and force him into last place. The initial reward was 2,000 GP, but as more viewers joined the broadcast and contributed to the mission, the bounty started increasing rapidly. It passed 30,000 GP and continued climbing toward 50,000. Golden Light was thrilled. He had heard that members of the Sword King's family held a grudge against Ji-han, but he never expected the reward for killing him to become this large. I, Golden Light, have received your determination. He declared that he would become Ji-han's personal Grim Reaper. The man was already acting like the final boss of the Bronze League, and Ji-han was still holding what looked like a wooden club. Golden Light activated charge. His body accelerated forward at tremendous speed as he prepared to end Ji-han's game in a single attack. Ji-han did not panic. Golden Light's sword was powerful, but Ji-han had his own weapon. A sturdy club from an extraterrestrial holy cooking set. The item was supposed to be used alongside a matching kitchen knife, but even by itself, the club was strong enough to fight with. Ji-han tightened his grip and swung with all his strength. The two weapons collided, sending energy through the arena. Golden Light attacked again. He even insisted that Ji-han should use a sword as a matter of courtesy, as if this were some honorable duel instead of a paid assassination attempt. Ji-han ignored him and continued countering each attack with precise strikes. The viewers soon realized that his attacks were not normal. Blue energy gathered around the club, and each impact carried the force of sword chi. Some spectators also recognized the white sacred flames surrounding Ji-han. If he's using divine power, is he really a support player? That question began spreading through the chat. Everyone had assumed Ji-han chose support because he could not fight properly. But now, the so-called support player was using divine power, sword chi, and a cooking utensil to pressure a gold-ranked troll. The fight quickly stopped being entertaining for Golden Light. Ji-han broke through his defense and struck him first. The system announced the first blood. Ji-han's achievement reward increased by another 100 points. Golden Light's confidence vanished. A moment ago, he had been promising his viewers a quick execution. Now, he was struggling to survive against a player he had expected to bully. Ji-han kept pressing forward, forcing Golden Light back with every attack. Then he glanced at the club in his hand. I haven't cooked in a while. Golden Light fell into the darkness of death, convinced that his glorious stream had finally come to an end. But just when it seemed all his light had disappeared, a brighter light appeared in front of him. Golden Light used the Crucifix of Revival and returned to the battlefield. Then he proudly announced his resurrection to the audience. The item could revive its user once, although it could not be used in national leagues, promotion battles, or guild matches. The spectators were stunned, while others mocked Golden Light for reviving after getting completely destroyed. Golden Light refused to accept the humiliation. He insisted that he would redeem himself through Song Ji-han's actions. Meanwhile, Ji-han continued fighting in the survival match. He quickly eliminated another opponent and received a double kill notification. As he thought about Golden Light's revival item, he remembered that nobody in the future had used it. Not because using it came with some terrible penalty. The item simply had serious flaws. The arena was unusually busy. Spectators had arrived to watch the proper games begin, and most of them were elves. The moment Jihan saw them, disgust crossed his face. He remembered that these elves had played a major role in humanity's downfall. But there was no point starting that fight now. Jihan decided to deal with them later and focused on the enemies directly in front of him. The other players began treating him like an outcast. They kept their distance as guards and fighters moved around him, clearly unwilling to approach after watching what he had done to Golden Light. Some opponents tried attacking in groups, but Jihan tore through them with ease. One cloaked man eventually panicked and ordered his companions to stop fighting and run. He warned them that Jihan had already ripped apart a gold-ranked player. At this point, Jihan was becoming frustrated. The players were scattering everywhere, making the hunt slower than it needed to be. He had already obtained the D-rank holy item called the Cult's Cooking Set, but he still needed to fight more enemies to unlock its full potential. The set contained 2 weapons, a club and a kitchen knife. A very normal combination if your cooking process involves murder. When a group of goblins surrounded Jihan, he finally discovered how the items were meant to be used. First, he had to smash the goblins' heads with the club. Then, he had to use the knife to cut open their hearts. The weapons had to be used in that exact order. Once Jihan followed the sequence correctly, the cooking set reacted. The system confirmed that he had properly activated the holy item. Then the goblins summoned their champion. The creature was nearly 3 times the size of an ordinary goblin, with superior physical and mental abilities. It towered over Jihan and looked like the kind of enemy that was supposed to make the entire arena panic. Jihan was not impressed. It's still just a big goblin. He raised his glowing sword and struck. The attack shattered the champion's body. Then Jihan finished the monster with the kitchen knife, completing the quest and receiving 500 achievement points along with 1 point of divine power. The system then revealed more information about the cooking set. The club and kitchen knife were divine items from another world. They had originally been used by a cult to cook their enemies. Jihan had finally discovered the proper method of using them, but the process was far too slow for efficient hunting. He had to smash each enemy with the club before cutting open its heart with the knife. That was not exactly a practical farming strategy. The cooking set's rank dropped from D to E, but after reacting once more, it granted Jihan another point of divine power before falling all the way to F rank. The item had burned through almost all of its remaining power, but Jihan had still gotten what he wanted. By then, he had turned his attention toward the remaining players. They were spread throughout the arena, which made them difficult to reach. Instead of waiting for them to come to him, Jihan decided to hunt them down himself. As he advanced, his expression became increasingly terrifying to the viewers. He stormed through the Colosseum with his sword, knife, club, and bare hands. Every opponent who crossed his path was eliminated. The system notifications began appearing one after another. Double kill, triple kill, quadra kill, penta kill. Jihan kept moving. Before long, he had defeated 10 players in succession. The audience exploded in disbelief. No one could understand how a Bronze League player possessed such overwhelming statistics. The commentators estimated that his strength, agility, health, and mana were all around 35 each. The Bronze League limit was only 25. Jihan was far beyond the supposed restrictions. Some viewers immediately accused him of hacking. Jihan ignored them. After reaching 10 kills, he completed a hidden quest and received 5,000 achievement points. He had obtained the things he wanted from the match, divine power and achievement points. But even after earning all of that, Jihan still felt that his gains were insufficient. He needed something more definite, something powerful enough to change his future. That was when a new notification appeared. An epic quest had been activated. Jihan was instructed to find the Shadow Queen among the spectators in the Colosseum and provoke her. The reward was 50,000 achievement points, along with the attention of a constellation known as the Shadow Queen. Jihan immediately understood how important that was. A constellation was an absolute being connected to the stars and the divine world. If one took interest in a player, its sponsorship could grant abilities that would otherwise be impossible to obtain. And if Jihan could attract even one constellation, the others might begin noticing him as well. He scanned the arena. Among the gathered elves stood several imposing figures surrounded by a dark aura mixed with crimson and violet. Somewhere among those spectators was the Shadow Queen. Jihan tightened his grip on his weapons. Finding her would be difficult. Provoking her would be even worse. But if the reward was truly 50,000 achievement points, Jihan was willing to make the entire Colosseum regret watching him. At any cost, he intended to provoke the Shadow Queen. Shang Jihan's 10-kill record at the Colosseum became the first achievement of its kind in South Korea since Yoon Sejin. The news spread rapidly through online communities, and a BattleTube broadcast analyzing Jihan's potential attracted thousands of viewers and nearly 10,000 new subscribers. Even members of the Sword King's family who had been hoping for Jihan's downfall began supporting him. Their anger had shifted toward Golden Light, since his defeat had contributed heavily to Jihan's kill count. Golden Light's own visitor log filled with insults and accusations that someone as weak as him had somehow reached the Gold League. Watching his reputation collapse in real time, Golden Light finally gave up. Then he suddenly stood up and announced that he would join the Song Jihan train. He began calling Jihan God Jihan and decided that his greatest dream was to become Jihan's editor. Golden Light had gone from trying to kill Jihan for content to applying for a job under him. Jihan, apparently not understanding the intensity of Golden Light's enthusiasm, simply declared that he would make him BattleTube's greatest star. This man had somehow recruited his former attacker without even realizing it. Later, Jihan returned home and found Sia staring at him in disbelief. She had watched everything that happened and could not understand when he had become so powerful. Their conversation eventually turned to Jihan's BattleTube account. Apparently, several viewers had tried to send him donations during the broadcast, but the donations had been disabled because Jihan had forgotten to activate the feature. Sia suggested increasing the minimum donation amount. In fact, she proposed setting it as high as 10 million won. Jihan was shocked by the number. Sia calmly questioned whether that amount was really too expensive. Her practical attitude reminded Jihan strongly of his older sister. Sia's bluntness could be irritating, but Jihan understood that she was genuinely trying to help. She was not being greedy. She was trying to make sure he did not waste an opportunity. That realization made Jihan proud of her. Jihan then explained that he had received an epic quest requiring him to find the Shadow Queen among the spectators in the Colosseum and provoke her. The only problem was that the audience was enormous. There were too many spectators, and Jihan had no clear way to identify which one was connected to the constellation he was searching for. Sia immediately volunteered to help. She promised to watch the match replays and search for the Shadow Queen herself. Jihan accepted her offer, although he felt guilty about relying on her kindness again. Sia already had enough to deal with, yet she continued helping him without hesitation. Afterward, Jihan decided to deal with the matters he had been postponing and returned his attention to the system. Using the achievement points he had accumulated, he purchased another class slot. His first class was Supporter, and the system offered him 3 options for the new one: Warrior, Archer, or Mage. Jihan selected Mage. Purple energy surged around him as the new class was added. He felt a strange power flowing from his heart. It was different from divine power, but Jihan already understood why he needed it. By possessing both the Supporter and Mage classes, he might be able to obtain a unique stat that normally belonged to only one person. Before his regression, Jihan had learned about that power from Baron. One night, Baron had gotten drunk and started talking about his feelings while sitting with Jihan. During that conversation, he revealed that he had once obtained a power called Force. Force was a stat created by combining divine power and mana perfectly. Because Baron was the only player who possessed 2 classes, he was also the only person capable of obtaining it. Force eventually became Baron's prized SSS rank gift. It was one of the reasons he reached the top of the world rankings, even though his control over the ability was poor. Jihan had admired the overwhelming power Force gave Baron, but in his previous life, he had never been able to reproduce it. Now, the situation was different. Jihan had 2 classes. He possessed divine power, and the Mage class had given him mana. If he could merge those 2 energies, he might obtain Force himself. So naturally, he tried immediately. Jihan concentrated divine power in his hands and directed mana from his heart toward the same point. He attempted to merge the 2 forces without allowing either one to escape. The result was a disaster. The energy violently burst apart, throwing Jihan backward and leaving him exhausted. He had used almost all of his mana in one attempt. Jihan collapsed against the damaged wall. Strength alone was not enough to control Force. He wondered if he simply needed more mana, but even holding the combined energy in his hands proved impossible. The longer he tried to contain it, the more unstable it became. Then Jihan considered another possibility. Instead of trying to hold the combined power in his hands, he would place it inside his body. He began meditating and pictured the structure of his energy. Divine power flowed from the upper dantian. Mana came from the central dantian, and another source of power from the lower dantian could stabilize the 2 forces as they struggled to merge. If Jihan could bring all 3 powers together perfectly, with nothing leaking away, he might compress them into something far stronger. So he drew the energy into his body and began the unification process. Red and blue energy collided inside him, forming a brilliant sphere surrounded by a violent purple aura. Jihan's entire body began trembling as the pressure increased. The system suddenly issued a warning. He was attempting to unify the 3 dantians. Then another notification appeared. The energy had surpassed the limits of what his body could endure. His life was in danger. The power continued spiraling out of control inside him, growing more unstable with every second. Outside the room, Sia noticed something was wrong. She turned toward the disturbance, her eyes widening as the energy shook the area around Jihan. Uncle? Shang Jihan's attempt to merge his 3 dantians had pushed his body far beyond its limits. Divine power, mana, and physical strength were supposed to be controlled with absolute precision. The user's stats also needed to reach at least 100. Jihan met none of those requirements. So the energy inside him went completely out of control, tearing through his body and causing unbearable pain. For a moment, the attempt nearly cost him his life. Outside the room, Sia heard the screams. She rushed toward him, calling his name repeatedly, terrified that something horrible had happened. But when she finally found Jihan, he had already recovered enough to act normally. Sia stared at him in confusion. This man had just been screaming like his soul was leaving his body, and now he was standing there as if nothing had happened. Jihan tried to make light of the situation, but Xia could not laugh it off. She admitted that she had been genuinely frightened. For a moment, she thought she might lose him too. That hit Jihan harder than the failed experiment. He had been so focused on gaining power that he never considered what his actions looked like to the person standing outside the room. To him, risking his life was part of changing the future. To Xia, it looked like she was about to lose the last family she had left. Jihan realized he had been careless. He apologized and assured her that he was fine. Once Xia finally calmed down, she returned to searching for the Shadow Queen. Jihan watched her leave with renewed determination. From now on, he would never show weakness in front of her again. His attempt to consolidate the three Dantians had failed because he lacked the necessary level and experience. But the failure had produced an unexpected result. By partially linking divine power and mana, Jihan had obtained the unique stat known as Force. The system explained that the connection between the three Dantians was being maintained weakly. Because of that connection, strength and force could now interact and share their values. Jihan's initial stats were 12 strength, 6 mana, 10 divine power, and 12 force. When he raised his strength to 14, his force also increased to 14. That was an enormous advantage. Even possessing force by itself was powerful, and if Jihan eventually managed to fully consolidate the three Dantians, the result could be even greater. Still, he decided to postpone another attempt. Trying the same process again at his current level would not be training. It would be suicide with extra steps. Jihan then decided to test his new mage class by attempting to cast a fire spell. A small flame appeared above his hand. For a moment, it looked like the experiment had worked. Then the system informed him that he did not possess enough mana. Jihan accepted the failure and went to sleep. By the next morning, he had gained 10 points of divine power. But the system immediately gave him another warning. Jihan could no longer absorb divine power from holy items ranked D or lower. From now on, he needed C-rank items or better. Jihan looked at the cheap items he had purchased with achievement points, including a hand acupressor and a toy ball. They had helped him earlier, but they were now practically useless. Frustrated, he decided that the only thing left to do was sell the remaining items on the second-hand market. When Jihan went to check on Xia, he found her exhausted. She had stayed awake all night, studying videos and searching for clues about the Shadow Queen. Her eyes were tired, but she still proudly told Jihan that she had found something interesting. The video was in another species fan cam. These broadcasts were created by people with the scope gift, an ability that allowed them to zoom in on and record other species from a distance. Xia showed Jihan a replay from the Colosseum. The footage focused on two high-ranking elves seated on ornate thrones. One was a dark elf, while the other was a blonde elf dressed in green and white. The viewers speculated that the dark elf might be a queen, possibly even the Shadow Queen. Jihan admitted that the theory sounded plausible, but he was not willing to accept it that easily. The constellation was not supposed to be found so conveniently. Xia offered to search foreign videos and even edit the footage herself. She explained that she had once made videos of her father's battles for fun. But the mention of her father immediately brought Yoon Seijin back to Jihan's mind. He looked at the damaged family portrait in the room and remembered how Xia had been left behind while her father pursued his own path. Jihan could not understand how Yoon Seijin had been able to leave his daughter alone like that. 2 days earlier, Jihan had learned more about the woman connected to the Sword King. Her name was Ito Shizuru. A representative explained that she possessed an SSS rank gift called a Woman of Matchless Beauty. The ability was powerful enough to make an entire country fall in love with her. Jihan was stunned. He wondered whether Yoon Seijin had fallen under the influence of that gift. The officials believed the ability went beyond ordinary mind control. It could reshape a person's thoughts and gradually mold their decisions. And similar incidents had happened several times before. Rising stars from Korea had suddenly naturalized in Japan, leaving the country at the exact moment their abilities became important. If Ito Shizuru faced few restrictions when using her gift, then she could potentially bewitch another powerful player whenever she wanted. Jihan had never heard of an ability like that. He was warned to be careful, but when he tried to learn more about Ito Shizuru, he discovered that almost no information about her was available. Japan was clearly protecting her identity and movements. Jihan remembered Manager Park Yoon-sik's warning and decided to prepare in advance. If Ito Shizuru's influence was already spreading, her side might have begun moving before anyone realized what was happening. Not long afterward, an aircraft bearing the markings of Japan's Neo Self-Defense Force descended over the city. Japan's self-defense force had landed in Korea. Yoon Xia was preparing for her first official public appearance since her father disappeared from Korea. She was nervous, but Song Ji-han reassured her that she had nothing to fear. He reminded her to stay confident, just as she had during her previous appearance. Then the two of them went downstairs to greet the guests at the auction. The event had been organized by the Korea BattleNet Department and Xia to auction off the former Sword King Yoon Seijin's possessions. But Jihan had chosen the items very carefully. He wanted Japan to pay attention. 3 lots had been prepared. The first contained Yoon Seijin's BattleNet connector, a high-end device capable of reducing the user's pain by 99%. The data stored inside the connector was included as well. The remaining lots contained Yoon Sejin's personal analysis of East Asia's top players. That information could become incredibly valuable before the upcoming Korea-Japan match. Jihan expected Japan to try obtaining all 3 lots. Before the auction even began, several uninvited relatives attempted to enter the hall. They claimed to be Sia's family and demanded to speak with her. When Sia saw them, she was shocked to discover that her aunt and uncles had come. The relatives immediately accused Sia of trying to sell off her father's inheritance. Jihan stepped in before they could pressure her further. He accused them of forcing Sia into the auction and trying to profit from Yoon Sejin's possessions. Sia, however, refused to back down. She declared that everything her father had left belonged to her, and none of them had the right to decide what she did with it. The relatives continued protesting, so Jihan ordered security to remove them from the venue. Afterward, Sia proudly told Jihan that she knew how to stand up for herself. Jihan admitted that she had handled the situation well. Our girl was learning fast. The two of them then continued toward the auction hall. Their arrival immediately attracted the attention of the reporters. Questions came from every direction. They demanded to know the purpose of the auction, why foreign nations were involved, what would happen to the Sword Palace, and whether Sia had given up on Yoon Sejin ever returning. Some reporters even accused Jihan and Sia of using the Sword King's belongings purely to make money. The questions became more aggressive by the second. Jihan quietly activated force. Red energy gathered around his hand. Then the reporters' cameras shattered or suddenly stopped working. The crowd stared in confusion while Jihan calmly reminded them that this was an auction, not a press conference. That was one way to control the media. The auction finally began. The first lots contained Yoon Sejin's connector and the data stored within it. The other servers contained his analysis of high-ranking players throughout East Asia. Everyone in the room understood how valuable the information was. No ordinary player could obtain data of that quality, especially with a major Korea-Japan match approaching. Before the bidding could progress very far, a representative from Japan's Neo Self-Defense Force stepped forward. He introduced himself as Takeda Kazuo, the organization's recruitment manager. With a confident smile, Takeda offered 5 billion yen for all 3 lots at once. The entire room went silent. That was not a normal bid. Japan clearly wanted everything immediately. Takeda then requested a private meeting with Jihan and Sia. Jihan refused at once. If Japan had something to say, it could say it in front of everyone. The auction was not an excuse for secret negotiations, and Jihan was certain that Takeda had another purpose. Takeda laughed nervously and insisted that he was only a guest who had come to bid. But then he warned Jihan that if he continued acting so aggressively, someone else might be forced to intervene. That someone was Takeda's bodyguard. A fighter known as Shadow stepped forward with a sword in hand. Takeda admitted that Shadow was not comparable to the Sword King, but claimed that she was still an exceptional player. The moment she entered the room, the atmosphere changed. The hall fell silent. Jihan studied her carefully. Her stance was familiar. So was her weapon. Even the pressure surrounding her reminded him strongly of Yoon Sejin. Then Shadow's eyes began to glow with power. Jihan's expression hardened. What the hell is this? He thought. A copy of Yoon Sejin? The confrontation with Shadow happened almost instantly. One moment, she was standing beside Takeda Kazuo. The next, she had appeared directly in front of Song Jihan with her sword already pressed toward his throat. Jihan remained calm. Before Shadow could attack, he struck her in the face and sent her flying backward. The sudden exchange stunned everyone in the auction hall. Shadow had moved so quickly that most people had barely seen her approach, yet Jihan had reacted immediately and knocked her away before she could even complete the attack. Jihan turned toward Takeda. Shadow would not be allowed to attack him during the auction. The entire event was being streamed worldwide through Jihan's BattleTube broadcast. If Japan's Neo Self-Defense Force drew its weapons in front of all those viewers, the entire world would see exactly what they had come to Korea for. Takeda apologized for his bodyguard's behavior, but his carefree attitude made it obvious that he was not genuinely sorry. He quickly redirected the conversation to the 5 billion yen offer for Yoon Sejin's possessions. Then he reminded Jihan that the actual owner of the auction items was Yoon Sia. Takeda offered Sia a private meeting. He suggested that if she accepted, she could learn where her father was. He clearly expected her to agree immediately. After all, what daughter would reject the chance to learn the whereabouts of a missing father? Sia refused. She had no desire to meet Yoon Sejin if the only way to communicate with him was through money. She also reminded Takeda that she was still a minor and would follow Jihan's decision. The entire exchange was being broadcast to the viewers. The audience quickly turned against Takeda and began demanding that Sia be protected from Japan's pressure. Takeda's expression tightened, but he still announced that the Neo Self-Defense Force would bid 5 billion yen for the auction lots. Jihan immediately understood what had happened. The private meeting had only been another tactic to manipulate them. Japan had already intended to offer the money from the beginning. Takeda then revealed that the bid had actually been made on Yoon Sejin's orders. He produced a sealed letter addressed to Sia from the Sword King. The letter expressed disappointment over her decision to donate the Sword Palace. It declared that their relationship as father and daughter was over. Takeda presented the letter as the final asset Yoon Sejin would ever give her. Jihan hated Yoon Sejin and had never trusted him. But he could not forget that Seijin had once been a dependable father to Seiya. That was what made his current behavior even more infuriating. This was not some stranger abandoning a child. This was a father using his final message to cut off the daughter he had already left behind. Seiya opened the letter and recognized the handwriting, but instead of breaking down, she calmly tore it apart. Then she looked at Takeda. "Tell Ito Ryuhei that I received his final asset. I'm glad to cut off our relationship." Takeda's attempt to pressure her had failed completely. Even after losing the private negotiation, Japan still obtained the auction items with its 5 billion yen offer. The auction ended much faster than anyone expected, leaving many attendees suspicious that the entire event had been arranged in advance. But Jihan had achieved exactly what he wanted. The Neo Self-Defense Force had come to Korea, revealed its interest in Yoon Seijin's possessions, and confirmed that Yoon Seijin was still communicating through Japan. Before the guests could disperse, Jihan used his new power again. Red energy gathered around his hand. Then a burst of flame erupted through the hall. The people nearby were horrified when they realized what Jihan could do. He was not only capable of warrior-level combat, he also possessed mana and divine power. Takeda, on the other hand, was ecstatic. He declared that Jihan was exactly the kind of person Japan needed and demanded that they recruit him. Guild representatives immediately surrounded Jihan. They promised to match whatever conditions he wanted, argued over who should speak with him first, and began throwing recruitment offers at him from every direction. Jihan was completely overwhelmed by the sudden crowd. He tried to stop the negotiations and explained that he was not in the right condition to discuss joining a guild. Then he asked Seiya to go ahead without him. He promised that he would catch up with her shortly. But before she could leave, Seiya suddenly staggered. A sharp pain struck her head. Her face turned pale as she clutched her head and struggled to remain standing. The room began spinning around her, and her balance disappeared. A moment later, she collapsed to the floor. Jihan immediately turned toward her. Seiya's collapse sent Jihan rushing to her side. He called her name and asked if she was all right. He even offered to take her to the hospital, but Seiya quietly grabbed his suit and leaned against him. Then she revealed the truth. She had only been acting. Seiya had noticed Jihan surrounded by guild representatives, with Japan already trying to pressure him. So she staged a collapse to interrupt the negotiations and give them an excuse to leave. Her performance worked perfectly. The people nearby became distracted, and Jihan announced that the auction was ending because his niece was unwell and needed to rest. As they prepared to leave, Takeda tried to stop them. He handed Jihan his business card and asked him to contact him later. Jihan used force to tear the card into pieces. "That is my response," he said. Takeda was stunned. He had just witnessed Jihan destroy an object using an ability that worked outside BattleNet. To Takeda, that single power made Jihan worth recruiting. And the fact that Jihan was still only a Bronze League player meant he had plenty of room to grow. Jihan and Seiya left the event together, satisfied with how everything had turned out. Japan had come to Korea, revealed its interest in Yoon Seijin's possessions, and exposed its connection to the former Sword King. Then Jihan received an unexpected notification. Takeda had sponsored him with 10,000 GP. He had also sent a message saying how happy he was to meet Jihan and asking to see him privately next time. Seiya found the message disgusting and considered blocking him. Jihan agreed that Takeda's behavior was unpleasant, especially since the sponsorship had arrived after the broadcast had already ended. Before they could leave, another guest approached them. She introduced herself as Lee Haeyeon, the third department head of the Divergent Guild. Haeyeon explained that she had come because she wanted to meet Jihan personally. She also apologized for entering, even though the event was restricted to invited guests. Apparently, she had used her connections with Korea's BattleNet department to get inside. Her confident attitude and familiar voice made Jihan suspect that he had encountered her before, but he could not immediately remember where. Haeyeon then introduced the masked woman accompanying her. The woman claimed that she had been Jihan's fan for a long time, but her identity and behavior quickly became strange. Jihan recognized several details about Haeyeon that very few people should have known, including her connection to gambling and her fondness for a famous quote from Dostoevsky. One of the men accompanying Haeyeon demanded to know how Jihan knew such private information. Only a small number of people knew that Haeyeon was a genuine gambler, so the question made the atmosphere tense. Jihan realized that the woman connected to American First was not an ordinary guild executive. In the future, she would become known as a reckless drinker and gambler. Yet despite that reputation, she would eventually rise to become a guild master because of her voice ability. Originally, voice only increased experience gain, but after the tutorial ended, its growth potential expanded to include stats and gift rankings. The strongest voice user began developing at an unbelievable rate, turning what seemed like an ordinary ability into a terrifying advantage. Jihan had already seen her before during one of his live broadcasts. The Divergent Guild had grown rapidly, from the wielder of the Plum Blossom Sword to zero. Haeyeon seemed determined to make sure Jihan understood exactly how strong the guild had become. The conversation soon became awkward. Haeyeon tried to control the meeting and keep business separate from personal interest, but her companion kept making comments that embarrassed her. Seiya watched the exchange with growing excitement. She began imagining that Haeyeon might become her aunt. "Jihan, meanwhile, had no idea what kind of romantic drama was unfolding in Sia's head. Haein invited him to meet privately and discuss joining the Divergent Guild. Jihan remained cautious. He had not decided whether he wanted to join any guild, and he still could not understand why Haein's voice seemed so familiar. When Haein asked for his contact information, Jihan awkwardly claimed that he did not know Sia's number and asked Sia to give it to him. Haein misunderstood his hesitation and assumed he was trying to play hard to get. He was not. Jihan genuinely did not know what number to provide. At that moment, Sia became dizzy again. Jihan caught her as she leaned against him and immediately decided that they needed to leave. He told Haein that if she gave him her business card, he would contact her first. Haein accepted the answer, although she looked close to tears. Jihan and Sia walked away while Haein smiled and claimed that she had handled the conversation perfectly. Her companion, Gaeong, clearly disagreed. The two began arguing as Jihan and Sia continued down the hallway. Behind them, Haein watched Jihan leave with a determined expression. She believed they would meet again soon. After leaving the auction, Sia told Jihan that the strangest part of the evening had been seeing him wear her father's clothes. Jihan explained that his own clothes no longer fit him, but Sia was not interested in the explanation. She teased him for making old-fashioned comments and pretending not to know his own phone number. Then she revealed that she had misunderstood his behavior at the auction. Sia believed Jihan had been trying to attract Lee Haein's attention. The misunderstanding hit her so hard that she began crying. She thought her fake collapse had ruined Jihan's chance at a relationship. Jihan was completely baffled. He assured her that he had never been interested in Haein and wondered who could possibly like a gambler like her. That did not exactly make the situation less awkward. To comfort Sia, Jihan entered the next BattleNet game. The match took place in the Gangnam area of the Bronze League, and the mission was defense. The players had to protect a crystal while surviving against an approaching mob of zombies. Jihan was still wearing the formal suit from the auction and felt exhausted after dealing with Sia's emotions. But even while tired and overdressed for combat, he had no trouble defending the crystal. Then he drew a massive sword. The weapon instantly caught the viewer's attention. It was the C-rank Urk Pontiff's horse-slaying sword, an extraterrestrial holy item. Despite being C-rank, it was unusually cheap because it was enormous and so heavy that most players could not use it effectively. Jihan handled it like it weighed nothing. He swung the massive blade through the monsters, combining its attacks with his strange energy and overwhelming physical movement. The viewers were confused. Jihan was officially a mage, but he was fighting like a warrior while wearing a sword that looked more appropriate for a raid boss. Soon, the chat began demanding to see his status window. Jihan hesitated. His regular viewers had supported him from the beginning, so he did not want to ignore their requests. But revealing his status now could expose too much about his abilities. Instead, he offered them a deal. He promised to reveal his status window if he reached 200,000 subscribers. At the time, he had only around 10,000. The viewers immediately complained that the goal was impossible. Jihan added another condition. If he failed to take first place in the match, he would reveal his status window. The viewers assumed that some troll would ruin his chances sooner or later, so they accepted the challenge. As the battle continued, Jihan examined the teammates assigned to him. He was the supporter. Golden Light, whom the viewers had nicknamed Sparkly, was the warrior. Another player appeared to be the mage. The final teammate was an archer. That archer was Diego Macid from Argentina. Before his regression, Diego had been Argentina's strongest player. At this point, however, he looked nothing like the legendary player Jihan remembered. His appearance was rough, his beard was unkempt, and his body seemed fragile compared with the powerful figure he would eventually become. But Diego possessed an SSS-rank gift called the God of Soccer. The name sounded old-fashioned, almost ridiculous, but the ability was powerful enough to turn him into one of the strongest players in the world. The viewers laughed when Diego attacked using a soccer ball. Jihan did not. He knew exactly what that strange gift would become. Then Jihan remembered Zero. Before the regression, Jihan and Zero had grown close because they both understood what it meant to lose their home countries. On their days off, they spent time together and bet on sports. Zero quickly became obsessed with gambling, constantly insisting that the next bet could change everything. Jihan repeatedly warned them to stop. Zero always gave the same answer. The endless possibilities were too difficult to ignore. The two of them carried the same guilt, the self-hatred that came from failing to protect the people they loved. Zero even carried a scar across their face, calling it the price they had paid for making a deal with the devil. They blamed themselves for the death of a friend. That was why Jihan understood their bond so quickly. They were both carrying the same kind of regret, even if they expressed it differently. And now, the present match had brought several familiar faces together much earlier than Jihan expected. Golden Light was delighted to see Jihan again and called their reunion fate. Diego reacted with alarm when he recognized him. Another dark-robed player was furious. He shouted that Jihan had caused him to lose one of his skills and declared that he never wanted to see Jihan again. Jihan found the entire situation strange. He had not expected to encounter these people together so soon, especially not inside a random Bronze League match. The battle intensified around the crystal. Jihan continued eliminating enemies while the viewers watched with growing excitement. They began asking about the identities of his teammates and joking about how absurd the team looked. A supporter who fought like a warrior, Golden Light pretending to be the warrior, a mage using strange abilities, and Diego attacking enemies with a soccer ball. The match was already bizarre before the opposing player received a system notification. A reward mission had been registered by the Sword King family account. Its objective was to destroy the crystal and prevent Song Jihan from taking first place. The reward was 50,000 GP. The dark-robed player began reading the mission aloud. But before he could finish, his expression changed. He had finally realized who the target was. This was not simply a mission asking him to win the match. It was ordering him to stop Song Jihan at any cost. The defense match began with Diego Masseed launching a soccer ball toward the crystal. Then he immediately demanded support buffs, insisting that an archer needed more power. Jihan realized that the increase in his divine power and force had finally made one of his strength buffs usable. He extended his hand and empowered the entire team. Golden Light was thrilled. He proudly praised Jihan for being an excellent supporter, even though Jihan was carrying a sword far too large for an ordinary support class. The viewers were just as confused. They were watching a supposed supporter fight like a warrior while giving everyone else powerful buffs. At this point, Jihan's class was less of a job description and more of a practical joke. Even Jihan's opponent, a mage he had encountered before, could not understand what he was seeing. After their previous conflict, why would Jihan strengthen the other players? The system then confirmed that the reward mission targeting Jihan was active. The objective was simple: destroy the crystals and prevent Song Jihan from taking first place. The reward had already climbed beyond 50,000 GP. The enemy players decided to do whatever they wanted. Jihan did not waste time thinking about them. He turned his attention toward the zombie mob. Jihan raised his hand and cast fire, combining mana and divine power through the force he had recently obtained. The result was absurd. The energy he had gained by fusing those two powers made the enormous zombie horde look completely insignificant. Blue energy exploded across the battlefield, launching zombies through the air like paper dolls. Then Jihan drew the massive horse-slaying sword and cut through the remaining enemies with overwhelming speed. The viewers watched as his kill count climbed past 100. Jihan had failed to complete a 1,000-kill quest in the past, but this time, he believed he could finish it. The system soon revealed a linked quest requiring him to kill 1,000 zombies alone in exchange for 3,000 achievement points. Jihan accelerated. He tore through the battlefield faster and faster, cutting down zombies while controlling the space around him. That was when he truly understood the value of force. It was not simply a stat that increased his strength. Its real power was space control. Jihan created an absolute territory around himself. Anyone who entered that area had their movements and actions restricted, allowing him to control the flow of the battle. The ability was not completely unfamiliar to him. Before his regression, Baron had repeatedly used force against Jihan while training with him. Baron's control had been poor compared with the ability's true potential, but Jihan had experienced force countless times. So after obtaining the stat himself, he understood its structure immediately. He combined force with martial power, mana, and divine power. The result was a battlefield presence that no Bronze League player could stop. The zombie counter reached 124 out of 1,000. Jihan continued cutting through the horde while Diego and Golden Light stared at the blue explosions tearing apart the arena. The viewers became convinced that Jihan would take first place again. They started discussing his promised status window reveal and urged him to reach 200,000 subscribers. Even his regular viewers believed his pledge to reveal his status if he failed to win would soon force him to keep his word. Golden Light then jokingly asked Kim Gyu-hyuk, known among the viewers as the first of Gangnam's trolls, to show his face. Kim responded by unleashing a fire spell near the crystal. The other players panicked. They shouted at him to stop and could not understand why he was attacking the crystal so recklessly. Kim ignored them. His attention was fixed entirely on Jihan. He cursed Jihan and accused him of manipulating Xia. According to Kim, Jihan had influenced his niece so thoroughly that she blindly trusted him. He demanded to know what Jihan had done to make Xia follow him so obediently. The viewers expected Jihan to lose his temper, but Jihan remained strangely calm. Kim continued provoking him. He insulted Jihan's family and accused him of gaslighting Xia while still attacking the crystal and interfering with Jihan's victory. Jihan's expression did not change. Instead, he turned the question back on him. What had Kim and the others done to Xia? Their accusations made it obvious that they believed Yoon Se-jin's version of events. But Jihan knew the truth. Xia was not the one manipulating anyone. She was the daughter who had been abandoned and pressured, while everyone else defended the man who left her behind. The other players shouted as the viewers reacted in shock. Jihan stood among the burning ruins with his sword in hand. The battle had only just begun, but Kim Gyu-hyuk had made one serious mistake. He had dragged Xia into it. Kim Gyu-hyuk's reward mission was worth 55,000 GP, and it had been issued by the Sword King family. The objective was simple: destroy the crystal and prevent Song Jihan from taking first place. Jihan immediately understood why Kim had suddenly become so reckless. A player who had already been defeated and humiliated would not normally throw his life away like this. Someone had given Kim a reason to rise again. That someone was the Sword King family. Kim continued insulting Jihan and accusing him of manipulating Xia. Jihan ignored every attack aimed at himself. But the moment Kim mentioned Xia, something inside him changed. After returning to the past, Jihan had met Xia again and remembered the nightmare he had tried to bury. In that future, Xia had been caught in a terror incident caused by the Sword King family. Her face had been covered in bandages to hide the scar, and when Jihan held her body, it had already lost all warmth. He had been unable to protect her. That memory had become one of the reasons he regressed. Jihan had returned to the past with many goals, but one of them mattered more than everything else. Xia would never suffer like that again. No one would be allowed to hurt her while he was alive. The viewers noticed the change immediately. Jihan had seemed calm while Kim insulted him, but the moment Xia was brought into the conversation, his expression became unmistakably cold. At the same time, Jihan realized that obtaining force had allowed him to use the nameless divine arts. His martial power had only reached level 30, so he could not perform the techniques perfectly, but he could imitate them. Jihan gathered the power of his 3 dantians into one point. Then he moved. Using the flashing sky thunder steps, he crossed the battlefield like a bolt of lightning and launched an attack powerful enough to shatter the tower around him. The others could barely follow what was happening. The zombie army was being destroyed faster than the players could react, and Jihan's path toward first place had become inevitable. The Sword King family quickly sponsored Kim with another 100 GP. They urged him to hurry. Jihan was moving too quickly. Kim obeyed, but instead of simply targeting the crystal, he began attacking anyone who obstructed him. When Golden Light tried to interfere, Kim unleashed a violent spell and threatened to burn him if he acted again. Diego Mayseed stepped in. He blocked the attack with a soccer ball and confronted Kim for insulting the teammate, carrying the group, and cursing Jihan's parents. Diego declared that he could not stand by while someone continued doing bad things and ruined the game for everyone else. Kim became even more enraged when he realized that Diego was opposing him too. Golden Light and Diego continued protecting Jihan's side while Kim tried to destroy the crystal through sheer force. Then Jihan finally confronted him directly. Kim shouted at him and demanded to know how he dared interfere with the Sword King family. Jihan answered with one word: shush. He seized Kim by the throat and crushed the mage's staff. Red energy tightened around Kim's neck as he struggled helplessly. Jihan admitted that he had considered exploding Kim's head the moment he arrived. But killing him would only make Kim lose a level, and the connector would normally filter out most of the pain. That was too easy. Jihan wanted Kim to experience something beyond ordinary common sense. From this moment onward, he would show Kim a world he had never known. Kim's body began trembling violently. He could not understand why the pain was already unbearable. He had already lost his skills and believed things could not get any worse, so he had assumed provoking Jihan was worth the reward. Now, he understood how badly he had miscalculated. Jihan stood over him, calm and merciless. "You're already in this much pain?" he asked. Kim's face twisted in terror, because Jihan had not even begun. Kim Gyu-hyuk finally broke under Jihan's attack. He begged for mercy, but Jihan continued exploiting a flaw in the BattleNet connector. By repeatedly healing Kim while damage overtime effects were still active, Jihan caused the system to overload. The connector stopped filtering the damage properly, forcing Kim to experience the full pain of every attack. Then Jihan used a rare internal technique that sent energy directly into Kim's body. His bones were crushed, and his muscles were torn apart from within. Even the highest grade connector could not protect him from that kind of pain. Kim screamed that he would rather die than endure it any longer. Jihan struck him down. The system announced that Kim Gyu-hyuk had died. But this was a match that allowed resurrection, so Kim soon returned to the battlefield. The moment he saw Jihan waiting for him, Kim panicked. He begged Jihan not to come closer. Jihan calmly reminded him that he should not have done something if he could not accept the consequences. That is a lesson Kim probably should have learned before accepting a 55000 GP bounty and antagonizing the strongest player in the arena. Then Xia donated 10,000 GP through the broadcast and begged Jihan to stop. She insisted that she was fine and that he had already done enough. The viewers joined her, pleading with Jihan because they were beginning to believe he had gone too far. Jihan paused, but before deciding what to do with Kim, he still needed one answer. He asked who had given Kim the courage to act so recklessly. Under pressure, Kim immediately revealed the truth. The Sword King family account had prepared the 50000 GP reward mission. Jihan realized that something was wrong. A reward that large had been offered for targeting a single player. That suggested the Sword King family account might not belong to just one person. Someone else could be operating behind it. Jihan grabbed Kim by the collar and told him he should be grateful to Xia. Her intervention had prevented Jihan from doing something much worse. Kim was delighted to hear that Xia had stopped Jihan and thanked her. Jihan then eliminated him from the match. Golden Light and Diego Maciet immediately turned the incident into broadcast entertainment. Golden Light announced that a troll had just been taught a lesson and encouraged the viewers to like and subscribe. The man had gone from trying to assassinate Jihan to hosting the punishment segment. Jihan returned to the zombie hunt. His kill count had reached 921 out of 1,000, leaving only 80 enemies. He quickly destroyed the remaining zombies and completed the linked quest. While moving through the battlefield, Jihan attempted to use the nameless divine arts together with the power of his 3 dantians, but he was still unable to control the technique properly. Instead, he relied on the energy he had already gathered and performed the flashing heavens lightning step. The jump produced a massive bolt of lightning. It struck the nearby tower and destroyed the surrounding zombies. Jihan had cleared the quest, but the technique was far too unstable. He admitted that he needed much more training. As the match began winding down, Diego asked if he could accompany Jihan the next time he entered the battlefield. Jihan thanked him for adapting to the situation and offered to arrange a meeting later so he could repay him properly. Then the ground began shaking. The tower trembled. Cracks spread across the battlefield, and the players panicked as a massive structure collapsed into a pile of rubble. Dust and debris filled the area. From beneath the ruins, something enormous began to rise. At first, the players thought they were looking at a stone wall. Then the shape moved. It was a gigantic hand. And this was not a normal hand. A huge mouth opened across its palm, revealing jagged teeth as the monstrous limb rose over the battlefield. The players stared upward in horror. Then a terrifying roar echoed across the red sky. The enormous hand belonged to a monster far beyond anything that should have appeared in the Bronze League. Its mouth opened across its palm, revealing rows of jagged teeth as the creature laughed over the battlefield. Jihan, Golden Light, and Diego Macid could only stare upward. The monster was so massive that even its hand dwarfed them. Before anyone could react, it began devouring the zombies around it, crushing them between its teeth and dragging them into its grotesque body. Jihan immediately recognized it. A flesh golem. It was an undead creature created by dismantling and recombining corpses, and it absolutely should not have been on a Bronze League map. Jihan suspected that its appearance was connected to the chain quest involving the source of the zombies. The system quickly confirmed his suspicion. After Jihan had cleared the defense map known as the 10 Towers, a new quest appeared. He had to defeat the zombies without using the crystals. Completing that objective unlocked a bonus mission. Stop the flesh golems created by the Black Hand, an Apostle of Doom. The reward included 10,000 achievement points and rare crystal fragments. Those crystal fragments could temporarily close the gap between players with completely different power levels. Golden Light and Diego immediately understood how valuable the reward was, but Jihan sensed something else. The mission had not been designed for them to clear easily. The reward was far too valuable, and the flesh golem was far too powerful. Jihan told the others to step aside. The monster was gold-ranked and possessed an enormous amount of vitality. Its body had been reinforced with countless pieces of flesh and stone, making it almost impossible to damage with ordinary attacks. But the golem had one true weakness, a core embedded in its chest. The problem was reaching it. The monster's massive body protected the core from nearly every attack, and anyone who got close would have to survive being crushed by a walking mountain of corpses. Jihan was not concerned. He had learned more about the foundation of the nameless divine arts. Its most basic technique was called the Cosmic Triad Martial Ultimate, a martial art built around heaven, earth, and humanity. These 3 meanings represented the sky, the land, and the people, the foundation of everything unknown. The first principle of the technique was simple: strike a mountain. Jihan gathered the power of his 3 dantians and raised his sword. Energy surged through his body, creating a radiant force that pierced the red sky. Then he used the technique called the Great Mountain Crown Press. A massive beam of golden power erupted from Jihan's body and descended upon the flesh golem. The impact shattered the battlefield. The attack tore through the monster's body, breaking apart its layers of flesh and stone. And Jihan did not need 10 attacks. He needed only 3 slashes. The third strike destroyed the core inside the golem's chest. The system announced that Song Jihan had eliminated a flesh golem. The remaining creatures were left helpless. Jihan's combination of martial power, divine power, mana, and force had turned him into an overwhelming presence, even on a map designed for Bronze League players. The viewers erupted in shock. They had watched Jihan fight like a warrior. They had watched him cast magic like a mage. And now, they had seen him use a martial technique powerful enough to destroy a gold-ranked undead monster. Golden Light experienced emotions he could barely describe. There was fear, despair, expectation, and desire. But eventually, all of those feelings blended into admiration. At first, Golden Light had only viewed Jihan as excellent material for his broadcast. Now, he believed Jihan was destined to become one of the strongest players in the world. Golden Light no longer wanted to entertain viewers with Jihan's actions. He wanted to record every moment of Jihan's rise and capture the exact instant he became a legend. Diego was just as impressed. After the battle, he and Jihan exchanged thanks and began speaking more seriously. Diego had always been genuine about competition. He could not tolerate people who ruined matches through spiteful behavior, which explained why he had opposed Kim Gyu-hyuk without hesitation. Jihan recognized that Diego was still far weaker than the player he would eventually become, but he also understood the potential hidden inside him. The power of the god of soccer had not yet fully developed. Diego was not weak because his gift lacked power. He was weak because he had not yet reached the point where that gift could truly shine. The battle had brought the two of them together, and at that moment, the connection between Song Jihan and Diego Maciel began. The bonus quest involving the flesh golems ended the moment Jihan destroyed one of the gold-ranked monsters. Because he had cleared the mission, the system awarded him triple the normal experience and GP rewards. Jihan was satisfied, but he still needed something else. After the match, he spoke with Diego Maciel and gave him a hint about the mage class. Diego began wondering whether another class might suit the power of his God of Soccer gift better. If anyone else had suggested changing classes, Diego would have dismissed them immediately. But Jihan had just demonstrated abilities far beyond anything Diego thought possible. So when Jihan offered the advice, Diego listened. Jihan invited him to discuss the matter over dinner. Diego agreed and offered to choose the restaurant himself. Golden Light immediately tried to join them. He wanted to stream the meeting and turn the dinner into more content. Jihan refused. The reward and opportunity belonged to Diego, and Golden Light's desperate pleading only made the viewers laugh. The next chain quest would not unlock until the Silver League. Jihan still needed 12 more levels before he could participate in the Silver Promotion Battle. Among his rewards, he received a crystal fragment. The item could grant a single-use divine blessing, but only in the Bronze or Silver League. Normally, that blessing belonged to the Sanctus class and increased every stat by 50%. That was incredibly valuable in the higher leagues. But Jihan found the fragment disappointing because it could only be used once. His first-place finish also increased his bonus experience and GP rewards by 50%. His level rose to 13, while both martial power and force reached 17. His classes were now support and mage. Then the system revealed that his Urk Priest's execution sword was reacting. Jihan had completely understood the faith contained within the relic, causing his divine power to increase by 1. However, the new power was immediately absorbed into force, so his force stat did not rise by the full amount. The relic's rank soon dropped from C to E. Then the sword began cracking. The 3 energy centers hidden inside it were losing control. Golden and blue power erupted through Jihan's room, threatening to destroy the equipment and injure him. Jihan struggled to contain the overflow. He quickly realized that allowing any more energy to escape would be dangerous, so he forcibly reabsorbed it into his own body. After the explosion finally ended, Jihan understood the problem. His power was growing rapidly, but his control was nowhere near good enough. If he tried to consolidate the 3 Dantians again before gaining more experience, he might destroy himself. For now, he needed to train. Meanwhile, Takeda Kazuo had moved into the building next to Jihan's residence. He considered the situation extremely troublesome. The plan to force Jihan into revealing his status window had failed, and other guilds were already trying to recruit him. Takeda and his allies continued manipulating the Sword King fan community. By pretending to be members of the Sword King family, they easily exploited the group's resentment and used it to send reward missions against Jihan. The latest mission offered 50,000 GP for destroying the crystal and preventing Jihan from taking first place. Takeda described the scheme as a saving hand from someone with a shared interest. The arrangement was convenient for everyone involved. Kim Gyu-hyuk could pursue revenge, while Takeda would get an opportunity to see Jihan's status window. That information was crucial. Takeda needed proof that Jihan was someone Japan had to recruit at any cost. His superiors demanded clearer evidence before authorizing further action, and Jihan's status window could provide exactly what they needed. But Takeda was running out of time. Jihan grew stronger with every game, while other guilds continued approaching him. Takeda could no longer depend on amateur strategies. In Japan, preparations were already underway. Takeda intended to obtain Jihan's status window, secure permission from the company, and then use the same special method that had once brought the Sword King under their control. At a shrine surrounded by purple energy, Ito Shizuru watched the situation unfold. She promised that once Jihan's status was revealed, she would make him theirs, just as she had done with the Sword King. Jihan's divine power was absorbed into force, increasing it by 1. He quickly figured out the pattern. Force increased once for every 3 points of divine power, and martial power rose alongside it. His martial power and force had both reached 18. That was great news. Unfortunately, crossing that threshold also came with a new limitation. From now on, Jihan could only absorb divine power from relics ranked A or higher. He stared at the requirement. An A-rank relic was practically impossible to obtain. Jihan immediately complained that the system had raised the difficulty just when things were becoming interesting. Then Xia burst into his room with exciting news. The 50 billion won from the auction had already been transferred into her account. Jihan was still wearing clothes torn and stained with blood after the execution sword had exploded. When Xia asked what happened, he casually explained that his weapon had suddenly lost control. Xia was not impressed. She immediately began scolding him for treating a serious injury like it was nothing. Jihan had survived a collapsing relic, nearly destroyed his own body, and apparently still believed the correct response was, "It's fine." Later, Jihan and Xia went out to eat Korean barbecue. It was his first proper meal outside since returning to the past, and Jihan admitted that eating out occasionally was not so bad. He still preferred Korean food, though. Sia teased him for failing to order anything more expensive even though she was paying. Jihan dismissed the idea and told her that from now on, they would eat together 3 times a day. Sia then revealed that she was returning to school. Jihan was surprised. Sia explained that she was the student president and did not feel right taking an extended break. She also had an important event coming up at the BattleNet Academy's gift hall, where she would receive a new gift. Her 18th birthday was August 22nd, and she had been looking forward to the gift hall blessing for a long time. Sia hoped that receiving a powerful gift might finally improve her situation. But Jihan already knew what would happen. Her gift would be ranked F. In his previous life, that result had destroyed her after she had spent so long enduring difficult circumstances. Jihan did not want to tell her the truth and crush her hopes before the event even happened. Instead, he decided to lower her expectations gradually. He also decided to drive her to school from now on. Sia protested that she was not a child, but Jihan refused to change his mind. They were already surrounded by dangerous people, and he wanted her to listen to him. Sia accused him of suddenly showing off and insisted that his behavior did not suit him. Jihan ignored the complaint and took her to the parking garage. Almost all of the expensive cars had been sold. Only one vehicle remained, a yellow car that had belonged to Sia's mother. Nobody had wanted to buy it because it was not worth much, so it had been left behind. The keys were still inside. Jihan took the driver's seat while Sia sat beside him with growing concern. She could hardly believe that he intended to drive that old car to the academy. The vehicle barely made it through the parking garage before it started smoking and struggling. Jihan stopped and calmly asked whether Sia was embarrassed. Sia insisted that embarrassment was not the issue. She was worried about what would happen when they actually arrived. Unfortunately, her concern was completely justified. At the BattleNet Academy, the cheap yellow car immediately attracted hostility. A man in an expensive suit began shouting that the parking spot belonged to him and ordered Jihan to move the vehicle. He insulted Jihan for driving such a poor car and demanded that he leave. The argument attracted a security guard. The angry man claimed to be the guardian of a student at the academy and continued behaving as if that gave him authority over the entire parking area. Jihan stayed calm and asked why the man was causing trouble when he had only pulled over to park. The man kept insulting him. Then the people nearby began recognizing Jihan. They identified him as Song Jihan, the Bronze Killer. Someone immediately took a photograph and uploaded it online. The post claimed that Jihan had arrived at the academy and was fighting with the owner of a Rolls-Royce. The comments filled with jokes about Jihan being 27 years old and still attending school, along with praise for how calmly he handled the situation. Meanwhile, activity was beginning inside the Reason Guild Company. Lim Ga-young was summoned and told to follow. Someone announced that they were heading to the BattleNet Academy to meet Jihan. The sudden decision caused confusion, but the people involved clearly did not want to wait any longer. One woman who had been ignored became furious. She demanded to know how they could disregard her, then declared that she would go meet Jihan herself. She prepared to leave with a determined expression. Just you wait, Song Jihan. The confrontation in the BattleNet Academy parking garage escalated when the wealthy guardian began insulting Jihan for arriving in an old yellow car. He ordered Jihan to bow his head and then tried to punch him. Jihan stopped the man's fist inches from his face. Red energy spread from Jihan's hand across the ground, freezing the guardian in place. The man could not move as cracks of power appeared across his face. Jihan calmly told him that his behavior was vulgar and reminded him that he was probably the kind of person who drove students around himself. The guardian was forced to kneel and apologize in front of Sia. The incident attracted the attention of academy staff and students, including the student vice president, Kim Hee-soo. He recognized Sia and was shocked to see her again. Sia's classmates gathered around her and began asking about her family's cars. They were surprised to learn that most of the vehicles had been sold, leaving Sia with the old car that nobody thought was worth buying. One student offered to arrange transportation for her and promised to speak with her father. Sia hesitated because she did not want to become a burden, but the student insisted that helping her would not be a problem. Jihan immediately sensed that something was different. In his previous life, Sia had not seemed to have people like this around her during this period. Now, classmates were offering help, and people were treating her differently. The future was already changing in ways he had not expected. Meanwhile, Lee Hae-in arrived at the academy, determined to meet Jihan before another guild recruited him. Unfortunately, by the time she reached the parking garage, Jihan had already left. Hae-in became increasingly anxious. She worried that foreign scouts would reach Jihan first, so she began searching for him. When she finally encountered him, Jihan calmly told her to stop biting her nails because it would not solve anything. Hae-in nearly fell for his calm attitude all over again. When Jihan asked what she planned to do next, she admitted that she had no choice but to pursue him directly. So Hae-in turned on a live BattleTube broadcast titled Match Forecaster Mr. Sung and began following Jihan's movements in real time. She had officially started chasing him through a live stream. Meanwhile, Jihan entered another BattleNet game. He tore through the match with overwhelming speed and power. He broke through shields with his bare body, used the nameless divine arts, and moved with the heavenly thunder steps. His attacks were so destructive that the viewers began comparing him to a natural disaster. Jihan's martial power, force, mana, and divine power worked together perfectly. Bronze League players could not react quickly enough. Even the strongest opponents were thrown aside before they could properly fight back. The viewers expected Jihan to finish in first place again. And, of course, he did. Jihan ranked first for the 5th consecutive time. As a reward, his experience and GP acquisition increased by 200%, and he gained 2 levels. He reached level 15. Then the system unlocked a new game mode, Dungeon. Unlike ordinary matches, Dungeon mode emphasized party cooperation. Battle.net encouraged players to enter with a group, while solo play was heavily restricted. Jihan immediately understood the problem. Too many people were already targeting him. If he joined a guild, there was no guarantee that his teammates would remain loyal. They could betray him, exploit his abilities, or become another source of danger. He considered joining an existing guild temporarily, but rejected the idea. Wherever he went, people would keep causing trouble around him. Jihan decided to endure the inconvenience until he reached the Silver League. Once he reached Silver, he would create his own guild. He would choose his own members, establish his own rules, and make sure nobody could use Xia or his abilities against him again. Standing amid the aftermath of yet another overwhelming victory, Jihan made his decision. I'm going to make my own guild. The next morning, Jihan prepared breakfast for Xia. She was surprised by how good the eggs, bacon, and sausages tasted, but Jihan insisted that he had only cooked the ingredients already in the kitchen. He promised to prepare a proper meal next time. All those years of cooking every day before his regression were finally paying off. The man had spent his old life surviving the apocalypse, and now he was casually unlocking his domestic skill tree. Xia asked if he planned to use Kim Hee-soo's car to get to school again. Jihan refused. The previous trip had attracted far too much attention, and the constant pursuit from reporters and scouts had become unbearable. Xia later explained that she was returning to school and would soon receive her gift hall blessing. Jihan quietly remembered what would happen. She would receive an F-rank gift. He did not want to crush her hopes before the event, so he decided to protect her as much as possible until then. Jihan drove Xia to the Battle.net Academy in the old yellow car. Reporters and scouts were already waiting outside. The moment they spotted Jihan, they began shouting his name and following the vehicle. It was less like a school drop-off and more like a celebrity escape scene. Jihan drove into a private parking area, but the attention continued. Xia's classmates and other students gathered around them while people debated what had happened to the expensive cars that once belonged to her family. Jihan's arrival also attracted several guild representatives. The crowd became so large and tense that Jihan decided they needed to change cars as soon as possible. Then Lee Haen appeared. She reminded Jihan that he had taken her business card but had never contacted her. Xia encouraged him to speak with Haen and promised not to interrupt this time. Jihan and Haen moved to a cafe near the academy. Haen asked him to spare some time for her and explained that she had prepared a proper answer to his previous refusal. She had arranged a platinum-level contract. Jihan was surprised by how much effort she had made. This was not just a standard recruitment offer from the Divergent Guild. Haen admitted that her personal feelings for Jihan had influenced the negotiations. Her interest in him was the reason she had pushed the contract so far, and that was when Jihan recognized something familiar. Haen had the same scent as Zero, the gambler from his previous life. Her calm attitude, her obsession with gambling, and even her way of speaking reminded him of Zero. The more Jihan observed her, the more certain he became. Lee Haen was almost certainly Zero. But Haen still did not have Jihan's phone number. She asked if he wanted to give it to her, but Jihan suggested settling the matter with a bet. The condition was simple. If Jihan failed to take first place in his next game, he would sign the contract with the Divergent Guild and give Haen his phone number. Haen was interested, but Jihan had another reason for proposing the wager. He wanted to confirm whether she possessed the same gift and abilities that Zero had possessed before his regression. The status window became part of the bet. Haen wanted to see Jihan's status, while Jihan wanted to verify her gift. The gift known as cultivation was considered embarrassing during this period because it mainly functioned as an experience growth ability. But Jihan suspected that Haen might possess something far more important. Haen accepted the terms but warned Jihan not to regret making the wager. Jihan connected to Battle.net. His live BattleTube broadcast began, and his regular viewers immediately welcomed him. He informed them that the new game mode was Dungeon. The map was called the Imperial Tomb of the Conqueror. Unlike ordinary matches, Dungeon mode placed a much heavier emphasis on party cooperation. Players had to move through dangerous corridors filled with traps, monsters, mazes, and specialized challenges. Solo play was extremely difficult. Jihan entered the dungeon while Haen and the others waited nearby. The viewers became excited immediately, expecting him to deliver another impossible performance. Jihan remained calm. Too many people were already targeting him, and he still did not trust any existing guild. If his teammates turned against him inside the dungeon, he could be seriously injured. Even so, he continued forward. He would soon reach the Silver League, and once he did, he would create his own guild. For now, he only needed to win. The dungeon doors opened. Inside the Imperial Tomb, a massive figure appeared. A dark rider with glowing yellow eyes rode through a burning, apocalyptic sky, surrounded by flames and destruction. The dungeon had begun. Jihan entered the Imperial Tomb of the Conqueror, a high-difficulty dungeon filled with monsters, traps, mazes, and complicated mechanisms. But the most dangerous condition was not any particular monster. Every member of the party had to survive until the end. If even one person died, the entire team could fail. Jihan's party consisted of 3 members from the Black Eagle Guild. They were polite, well-equipped, and clearly experienced, which immediately relieved Jihan. At least there were no obvious trolls in the group. The Black Eagle members initially expected their warriors to lead the party. Jihan calmly rejected the idea. He would take the front. With his current strength, he had no reason to hide behind anyone. The team followed him into the first basement floor. Terracotta Imperial Tomb Guards soon attacked. The Black Eagle members began preparing a defensive formation, but Jihan had already rushed forward alone. He smashed through the stone soldiers with his bare hands, shattered walls, and destroyed the guards as if they were nothing more than sand statues. The Black Eagle members could barely keep up. The dungeon contained 10 separate passages, with each path assigned to a different party. Every route eventually led to the 7th basement floor, where the final stage awaited. Jihan's team quickly took the lead. They cleared the first 3 floors at an absurd speed, leaving the other parties far behind. Then Takeda Kazuo sent Jihan a 10000 GP donation and another message urging him to check his memo box. The viewers immediately recognized what was happening. Japan was still trying to recruit Jihan. Jihan answered clearly. Even if Takeda killed him, he would never go to Japan. Instead, he would oppose Takeda's plans. The Black Eagle members were moved by his response, while the viewers began worrying that Japan might eventually succeed in taking Jihan away. By the 4th basement floor, the dungeon's traps became much more obvious. The walls and floors were designed to warn players that danger was nearby, but Jihan remained calm. He told the Black Eagle members that he would take the front again and leave the rear to them. The moment Jihan moved ahead, a new system notification appeared. The Sword King clan had registered a reward mission worth 1 million GP. The objective was for the members of the Black Eagle Guild to quietly commit suicide without being caught. Jihan immediately understood what was happening. The dungeon party had been targeted. The Black Eagle members were not simply trying to clear the dungeon. Someone had paid them to sabotage the run and eliminate themselves at the right moment. The members tried to keep their movements subtle so the mission would not become obvious. But Jihan was watching them carefully. He understood that the exact moment they ran away from him would also be the moment the entire party failed. Somewhere else, the people behind the plan were celebrating. They had bribed numerous players and believed money had finally created a strategy capable of stopping Jihan. Someone laughed triumphantly in front of a bank of monitors and declared that they had won. But Jihan continued moving through the dungeon. He was fully aware that the people around him might have been turned against him. The trap was about to close. The 4th floor corridor of the Imperial Tomb was packed with hidden traps. Without warning, arrows fired from every direction. The party immediately ran for their lives. One of the Black Eagle Guild members tried to protect Jihan by using a skill to destroy the arrows, but Jihan calmly told him that he was fine. Then he activated Force, Absolute Zone. A territory spread around him, dominating the space within it. The arrows stopped in mid-air. They could not move forward, change direction, or even continue their attack. The Black Eagle members were stunned. The viewers, meanwhile, once again praised Jihan as an impossible Bronze League player. Jihan then used the footwork of the nameless divine arts, Heavenly Thunder Steps, to move through the corridor. His movements became so fast that the others could barely follow him. He struck down the stone soldiers and shattered obstacles with his bare fists, destroying them as easily as sand statues. The party quickly cleared the next section of the dungeon. But Jihan soon noticed that something was wrong with the Black Eagle members. They were behaving strangely and seemed determined to move away from him. The reason became clear when another reward mission appeared. Sword King Clan 787 had issued a mission offering 1 million GP to any Black Eagle Guild member who quietly committed suicide without being caught. Every member of the guild had received the same mission. The dungeon party had turned into a death competition. The guild members began fighting among themselves because the dungeon would end for whoever committed suicide first. Each of them wanted the reward, and their teamwork had completely collapsed. They were no longer trying to survive the dungeon. They were competing to see who could die first. Jihan immediately intervened. He stopped the guild members before they could kill themselves and demanded to know why they were acting so disgracefully. One of the Black Eagle members deeply apologized on behalf of the guild. Jihan told him there was no need to apologize. He had already stopped them. Jihan had expected the Sword King clan to target him, but he had not expected them to use money to manipulate an entire guild. The enemy was no longer relying on one reckless player. They were bribing anyone who could be used against him. Then Golden Light appeared through the live broadcast and claimed credit for helping Jihan. He explained that he had been watching Jihan's stream continuously and noticed the million GP suicide mission before anyone else. He had warned Jihan about the plan. Golden Light proudly declared that he was Jihan's strongest assistant. The audience laughed at his arrogance, but they also had to admit that he had genuinely helped. The man was still a walking advertisement for himself, but at least this time, he had earned the promotion. Golden Light's involvement made it clear that Takeda's strategy was failing. Takeda had been desperately trying to force Jihan into revealing his status window and recruiting him into Japan, but Jihan had blocked every attempt. Behind the scenes, Takeda was being criticized for his failure. His allies explained that they had not intended to repeat the same strategy, but money was the only tool available to them. They had bribed numerous players and expected the plan to succeed. Jihan, however, continued advancing through the dungeon. He told the viewers that he would never go to Japan, even if someone tried to kill him. Instead, he would personally block Takeda and the Neo Self-Defense Force. The party eventually reached the 4th basement floor. The corridor ahead appeared straight, but the walls and floor were covered with obvious signs of traps. Jihan studied the passage and recognized that danger was hidden everywhere. He decided to take the lead once more. The others would remain behind and cover the rear. The Black Eagle members hesitated, but Jihan moved forward without waiting for them. He knew that the moment they ran away would be the moment the entire party failed. Then a powerful presence began stirring deep inside the tomb. The traps were only the beginning, and the people manipulating the Black Eagle Guild had not given up yet. Jihan stepped into the corridor, ready to confront whatever was waiting ahead. Jihan's party continued deeper into the Imperial tomb, while the Black Eagle Guild members kept trying to escape and complete their suicide missions. Jihan caught them before they could get away. 3 armored members of the guild turned on him and threatened that the entire Black Eagle Guild would become his enemy if he continued interfering. Jihan calmly ignored them. Then he defeated all 3 in a matter of moments. He tied them together with rope and began dragging them through the dungeon. The Black Eagle members could not understand how a supposed supporter had overwhelmed them so easily. Jihan had struck their pressure points with perfect precision, using a technique normally available only to an advanced warrior class known as martial artist. He admitted that it had been a long time since he used those techniques, but he had not forgotten them. One of the bound players continued insulting Xia. Jihan stopped immediately. He warned the man to keep quiet. Jihan did not care about insults directed at himself. But the moment someone mentioned Xia, the entire atmosphere changed. That was the one topic nobody was allowed to use against him. The prisoners could still die inside the dungeon, so Jihan repeatedly healed them while dragging them forward. The viewers could barely believe the sight. Jihan was torturing and healing the same 3 people at the same time, turning the dungeon into the strangest escort mission in BattleNet history. Eventually, he reached the 6th basement floor. Only the final stage remained, but the area was so dark that Jihan could barely see ahead. Then clay soldiers began rising from the ground, surrounding the corridor. Jihan continued walking while dragging the 3 prisoners behind him. He drew his sword and cut through the soldiers one after another. The clay guards could not slow him down, and the Black Eagle members could only watch in fear as Jihan dismantled the entire dungeon by himself. The path eventually led to a chamber filled with ancient guards. Their eyes glowed red as they repeated the same warning. Do not interfere with His Majesty's rest. The Emperor is eternal. The guards had entered a berserker state. The system then presented Jihan with a limited quest. Kill all the guards and receive 1,000 achievement points. Jihan placed the bound Black Eagle members inside a protective barrier. Then he used force, absolute territory, to create a shield around them, ensuring that the guards could not reach the prisoners. The Black Eagle members were shocked. After everything they had done, Jihan was still protecting them. Jihan explained that once they were inside the barrier, he no longer needed to actively protect them. Inside the absolute territory, everyone's movements were slowed. The guards could barely advance. Jihan, however, moved freely through the chamber. The ability reminded him of Baron's force. Baron had possessed incredible power, but mainly used it to reinforce his mana. Jihan understood that force could do much more than that. Inside his territory, he had complete control. The stone soldiers surrounded him. Jihan shattered them with his bare hands and crushed their weapons as if they were made of clay. When the guards finally closed in, he drew his sword. Then he cut through them in rapid succession. The chamber shook as the remaining enemies were blasted backward by the force of his attacks. One by one, the guards fell. Jihan stood alone among the ruins, surrounded by broken stone and scattered crystal fragments. The ancient soldiers had been completely defeated. The system announced that he had cleared the quest. Jihan had not simply survived the dungeon. He had transformed the entire battlefield into a territory where he possessed absolute dominion. On the 7th floor of the Imperial Tomb of the Conqueror, Jihan finally reached the last stage. The rules were simple. Every member of the party had to survive, and every player had to pay respect to the king before the stage could be cleared. The Conqueror welcomed the intruders and declared that gold existed to be taken and pillaged. Then he revealed the final condition. Every player had to prostrate themselves before the king. Jihan entered the hall while dragging the 3 bound members of the Black Eagle Guild behind him. He threw them into the Silver Circle and activated absolute territory. Even though the prisoners were far away from him, the ability controlled their movements completely. The 3 players were forced to kneel. One of them cried out in pain when his face struck the floor. Jihan's force had reached 18, and the range of his absolute territory had expanded considerably. Inside its area, resistance was basically optional, and the system had not given the prisoners the option. Once all 4 players were kneeling, Jihan reached for his sword and completed the ritual. A perfect clear was achieved. The Golden Conqueror acknowledged them and told the intruders they could return. The system confirmed that the 7th floor of the underground had been cleared, and a return gate opened. The Black Eagle members were relieved. Their reckless mission had cost them an enormous amount of money, but they believed they could at least secure first place. Even the viewers were amazed that Jihan had cleared the dungeon so quickly. But Jihan did not leave. A hidden quest appeared before him. Pay your true respect toward the statue of the Conqueror. The reward was 5,000 achievement points and the arrow of the Conqueror. The achievement points were already valuable, but the second reward caught Jihan's attention. The weapon looked more like a spear than an ordinary arrow. If the Conqueror was willing to offer something that powerful, then merely kneeling was clearly not enough. One of the Black Eagle members wondered why Jihan was still standing there. Jihan struck him down. Then he turned toward the Golden Ruler. I'll pay my true respect, not to a mere conqueror, but to the King of Plunderers. The hall erupted into violence. The bound players were thrown around by powerful attacks, and the system announced that a player had died. The viewers watching the broadcast were left confused and horrified. Jihan had already cleared the dungeon, so why was he suddenly attacking the people he had dragged through it? Then the Golden King finally responded. King of Plunderers? Are you referring to me? Jihan explained that a conqueror was simply a plunderer among plunderers. He was not interested in the piles of gold scattered throughout the tomb. He wanted the item that was truly valuable, the arrow of the conqueror. The king's expression changed. His stern face turned into a delighted smile. He was pleased that Jihan understood the value of plundering something worthy. Laughing loudly, the conqueror declared that he had taken a liking to this particular plunderer. Because Jihan had shown him genuine respect, the conqueror agreed to bestow his treasure. A powerful weapon appeared before Jihan. He calmly thanked the king and accepted it, gripping the glowing hilt with both hands. The conqueror warned him to try and receive what he had been given. Jihan answered that he would gladly take it. Then the golden warrior drew his bow. A magnificent phoenix of flame spread its wings behind him as overwhelming energy gathered around the arrow. The conqueror named the attack his Phoenix Arrow. Jihan tightened his grip on the newly acquired sword and braced himself. Then the terrifying attack was launched.